had the benefit of a very long relationship, if you may call, with Uncle Gopinath Pillai, as I first knew him, when my father first introduced me to him at Onam Sports at Farrer Park Stadium in the 70s. Now, there are many stories and anecdotes that I can share, but for the benefit of the many speakers who are here, I don't want to overlap or take the thunder away from what they're going to say. I'm just going to pepper some information here and there. To start the ball rolling, it's my pleasure and privilege to invite the Vice President of Singapore Malayalee Association, Sunu, to do the welcome address.
Mrs. Shamala Gopinath Pillai, family members of Mr. Gopinath Pillai, John Water, the co-author of the book, ladies and gentlemen, welcome and good afternoon. Ellavarkkum namaskaram. SMA is indeed honored to hold today's book discussion event that promises to unravel further what we did not see or know about Mr. Gopinath Pillai's life. Today's event is also an opportunity for all the Malayali organizations to come together and show our deepest appreciation and gratitude to a man whose invaluable contributions to the Malayali community cannot be overstated. You'll hear about his contributions from the various speakers. Gopinath Uncle, as we fondly call him, was a teacher, a journalist, a businessman, and a diplomat. Yes, he wore many hats. To us, he was a mentor, a guide, an advisor, and a sincere friend. Now, although I had known of Mr. Gopinath Pillai since young, it was only after I joined SMA's committee in 2017 that I got to interact with him. Whenever we in SMA wanted to embark on a new initiative, we would seek his advice and pick on his wisdom. We would also update him on the upcoming events in his beautiful home. One advice he constantly gave us was, do not conduct too many events. You burn out. Plus, you want quality, not quantity. So Gopinath Uncle was assertive, considerate, diplomatic, enthusiastic, encouraging, supportive. Well, the list goes on. If we want to describe this quintessential man who has given us an honest and enjoyable recount of his accelerating journey, where he expresses his thrills of victory and agony of defeats. Now, I'd like to end this speech with a quote from his book. Quote, "Life is more than the eye can see and comprehend. It is this vastness that keeps us optimistic, humble, and enterprising." Well, with that, I wish you all an enjoyable and fruitful afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sunu. The next man, well, if I want to completely introduce him, it will take a while. Former nominated MP. He was president of Singapore Malayalee Association. Later on, moved on to its trustee and advisor. He was vice president of SINDA and trustee, and currently trustee of the Sri Narayana Mission as well. He sits on various boards and probably has interacted with Mr. Gopinath Pillai in several capacities to deliver the keynote address. My pleasure and privilege to welcome Mr. Vishwa Sadashivan.
Thank you, Bimal. Good afternoon. Namaskaram. I've been given 15 minutes. That's a Herculean task. After reading 300 pages of the book, very closely, there's just so much one would want to share, but I shall stick to the 15 minutes. I have known Mr. Gopinath Pillai for almost 40 years now, and over the years, our relationship evolved. Pillai started off as a mentor to me, then as a colleague in organizations and on some boards, as a partner in crime, and more recently, as a friend. We didn't always agree on things. In fact, there were several instances where we disagreed vehemently, but we were always able to talk it through and, if necessary, agree to disagree. This was possible because we are both faithful to purpose and have an abiding respect for intellectual and emotional honesty. Our celebration of humor and wit helped. This was why, when asked if I could deliver the keynote review of this seminal work by Gopinath Pillai, I said yes, without hesitation. First, it is an honor and privilege because I respect him. Second, the book is by a man who is well placed to narrate the diary of a nation through his varied experiences and escapades over 65 years. Third, I know that I would enjoy reading 300 pages, which I did. I would like to start by highlighting three quotations in the book that, for me, capture the author's preoccupation and dilemma that walked with him over the years. First, in his preface, Mr. Pillai says, I quote, "I did sometimes have the worry whether all these engagements might make me a jack of all trades, but a master of none. However, I have balanced this concern by gaining as much knowledge from whatever professional framework I was working in as possible, what you might call an experience-based or insider's knowledge. People might ask for your views, but if you are not excelling in your field, they might not take you seriously." End quote. It's evident that for Pillai, credibility, relevance, and being taken seriously in matters that matter are of utmost importance. The second aspect is what I see as a struggle to balance the somewhat contradicting yet deep persuasions. On the one hand, he is a highly logical and rational man, yet he can't seem to avoid the appeal of spontaneity, of emotions, and even astrology, or a penchant for fatalism. Just before accepting a job offer in Bangkok, he consults an astrologer. Here's how Pillai narrates the experience, and I quote him. "What happens if I decide not to go to Thailand and stay here instead?" he asks the astrologer. He gazed at me calmly and answered, "You will go to jail." I could not believe it. I took a Cathay Pacific flight to Bangkok in October 1962. About 4 months after settling in Thailand, I read in the Bangkok Post that a large number of people had been arrested in Singapore as part of Operation Cold Store in February of 1963. The Malayan and Singaporean governments, taking approval from the Internal Security Council, had rounded up major leftist activists and put them in jail on the basis that they were communist sympathizers and who threatened national security. It was a profound event that shaped the early political trajectory of Singapore. A lot of my friends and former Socialist Club members were detained. while sitting in Bangkok reading the newspaper, I thought back to the astrologer's prediction about my landing in trouble, which I had never taken seriously. The experience was perplexing, and how did he know? End quote. Likewise, almost as a motive running through the book, I see Pillai striving to deconflict his latent belief in socialist values and what appears to be his survival instinct to be practical. This is what he shares, I quote him. Many of my socialist friends during this transition began to feel I had undergone a transformation, a political mind shift from socialism to capitalism. My reasoning was that a person has obligations after he marries, and the person he marries is here as witness. Looking after my family would be my primary duty now. These were friends I knew well, and to their credit, they tried to empathize with what I was experiencing. Many also held down various jobs and did not see what I was doing as strange. But I think they were perhaps waiting to see how far I would stray, how much of a capitalist I would become. Occasionally, snide remarks were made in jest, like, quote, our friend who is waiting to become a millionaire. I guess this is what it means to be a pragmatist in Singapore. Third, Pillai is essentially people-centered, be it his family, his friends, or his comrades. Right through the pages of the book, he shares powerful instances of how individuals helped him address tricky situations. People close to him gave him and continue to give him strength and remain at the core of his existence. He says it aptly, and I quote, my entire life, I can honestly say that I have been truly blessed by the trust and love of wonderful parents and good friends. In the concluding pages, he speaks with emotional authenticity and gracious gratitude. My family, through many turbulent junctures, has always kept me steady. I continue to view my decision to migrate from Malaysia to Singapore as the second best decision of my life. Marrying Shamala was the first. I live with my wife and 2 daughters in a full, happy household. My son, Prakash, lives not too far away from us. I'm also a grandfather blessed with 2 grandsons, Arjuna and Aditya, both of whom bring me tremendous joy. End quote. It's clear that even though Pillai has had countless work preoccupations, it was the people close to him who continue to light up his universe. Now, true to form, Pillai has provided priceless nuggets of information on what really happened behind the scenes. I'm talking about critical turning points in our nation's history, especially the earlier years. Many of us may not be aware or be able to fathom that there was an era when university students in Singapore held rallies on campus and challenged the rulers in Singapore. Pillai was intimately involved in these activities in the late 1950s and early 1960s. As a student, he joined the University Socialist Club, or USC, best known for its feisty anti-establishment stand. Pillai became its president. He was a frequent contributor of Fajar, F-A-J-A-R, the official publication of the USC. The USC was significant enough for founding Prime Minister Mr. Lee Kuan Yew to become the legal advisor and aid in the Fajar trial in court in 1954. And 1954 was when the People's Action Party, the ruling party, was founded. Gopinath Pillai wrote an article for Fajar titled, Kerala, Testing Ground for Democracy. The opening paragraph of his article read as follows. Much attention has been recently focused on the state of Kerala. This state first came into the limelight 27 years ago when for the first time in history, a communist party was elected into office. Today, Kerala has again hit the headlines due to the very questionable tactics employed by the opposition to compel the central government to establish presidential rule. End quote. By the time the article went to print, the central government announced the decision to impose presidential rule in Kerala. Pillai changed the title of his article promptly to Kerala, Deathbed of Democracy. It fed into his spirit of adventure, palpable in the passion with which he describes his work in Intraco. I quote, "We were united in our buccaneer-like spirits. We went into promising diverse foreign economies to trade, and if there was something that we wanted, we did the deals to make that possible. If there was a security problem in any country that was seen to be a deal breaker, our group was expected to step in and have a handle on the political situation. Many of the countries we traded in fell under the socialist bloc. This included China, whose trade with Singapore was restricted. Trade with other countries, such as South Africa, was restricted as well due to apartheid. Western countries treated it as a pariah. Big countries like America and Britain could release fantastic rules about which countries the international community should trade with, while they could do as they pleased whenever required." End quote. Quite a feisty man. With entrepreneurship flowing in his veins, emboldened by a penchant for taking risks, calculated albeit, Pillai started looking at doing business in India when it started opening up from 1991, when Mr. Narasimha Rao was the Prime Minister. The stars became more aligned in 1994 when Singapore's Prime Minister Goh Chok Tong was chief guest for India's Republic Day celebrations. This was in 94. Prompted by his clairvoyant-like instincts, Pillai whispered strategically to the Prime Minister. This is how he shares the story. I quote, "Once when I was in India, I happened to cross paths with Mr. Goh Chok Tong. He shared with me his plans to visit the Golden Temple in Amritsar and asked if there was anywhere else that I thought he should visit. I suggested that he explore Ahmedabad in Gujarat. The Chief Minister of Gujarat at that time was India's current Prime Minister, Narendra Modi. To my delight, PM Goh Chok Tong took my advice and boarded a flight to Gujarat. He was impressed with what he saw there. This impromptu trip helped him cement a strong and lasting relationship with Mr. Modi. Modi refers to Goh Chok Tong as the tall man of Singapore. It might not be wrong to say this helped lay the foundation for a healthy relationship between our countries, as well as a friendship that continues to this day." End quote. Soon enough, Pillai was to profit from the cordial ties between the two countries. The opportunity didn't come to him on a silver platter. He had to fight for it every step of the way with a never say die attitude. He had an enduring faith in India. Together with some close friends, Pillai launched Gateway District Parks Limited in 1994. It was an India-wide network of cold storage that went on to become a successful and highly profitable listed company. Pillai shares his journey with Gateway. It is an intriguing tale of clever deal-making and firefighting with stamina and nerves of steel to deal with the constant ups and downs, especially in the early years. In 1990, Gopinath Pillai embarked on what became a 31-year honorary and honorable career with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Singapore. He spent the first 15 years as the non-resident ambassador to Iran and concurrently for 7 years as the non-resident High Commissioner to Pakistan. He then served as ambassador at large till 2021. His interest in and knowledge of history and people management made him a natural trust builder, the quintessential diplomat. By this time, reading the book, I was asking myself, how is it humanly possible for anyone to juggle so many things and ensure each is done with exacting standards? Then came chapter 21 of the book, which listed yet another 5 leadership positions Pillai held from 1977 to the end of 1921. This is his justification I quote, "On the side, I have always involved myself in what I like to call extracurricular activities. Small projects that I found interesting and which I often joke helped to keep me out of trouble. These ECAs gave me a sort of double life as I strove to fulfill the duties of my regular 9-to-5 job as ably as I could. When a person is passionate about something, he will find the time to set out and do it." End quote. In a nutshell, these extracurricular activities started with Pillai becoming the president of the National University of Singapore Society, which is the university's graduate club, from 1977 to 79. He then served as the first chairman of the largest supermarket chain in the land, NTUC FairPrice, for 10 years from 1983. He was also the chairman of the Hindu Advisory Board and a board member of the Hindu Endowments Board. As an active board member and subsequently chairman of the Advisory Board of the Indian Heritage Centre, Pillai helped persuade the government to underwrite the cost of building the premises, which he estimates was around $21 million. Pillai described it as perhaps the most important single event from 2015 for the Indian community in Singapore. In 2004, he was given a task which most wouldn't consider an extracurricular activity. I'm talking about the setting up of the Institute of South Asian Studies, or ISAS, as its chairman. Under his stewardship, ISAS organized 4 hugely successful South Asia diaspora conventions. Each had about 1,000 distinguished delegates from South Asian countries and Singapore. Gopinath Pillai's affinity and indeed affection for Indian and especially Malayalee heritage and culture was cultivated when he was a little boy. A couple of years after he was born in Singapore in 1937, he spent 7 years in Kerala with his mother. It was only when he was 9 years old that he returned to Singapore to join his father, who went on to publish Singapore's first Malayalam newspaper. It was called Kerala Bandhu, which literally translated means relative of Kerala. This was to have a bearing on Pillai's deep involvement with the Singapore Malayali community years later. He said this of the Malayali community in the book, and I quote, "The Singapore Malayali Association, SMA, started in 1917 as the Kerala Mahajana Sangam, is one of the country's oldest registered associations and is hailed as the first Malayali association outside of India. Since its founding, the group has gone out of its way to support underprivileged and low-income families with a good education." End quote. In keeping with the spirit, in 1998, Pillai helped bring together all Malayali associations in the land to have a grand Onam celebration dinner. Then DPM Lee Hsien Loong was the chief guest. At the event, the IT Services Cooperative was launched as a Malayali contribution to the Indian community. The aim was to refurbish and upgrade used PCs and then place them in the homes of families that can't afford them. The program lasted a few years with more than 2,000 families benefiting from it. By this time, the reader of the book would ask, what about the family? Just as he started the book by talking in some detail about his parents, Pillai ends the book most aptly by toasting to the anchor in his life, his family, and his wife, Shyamala in particular. Given the multitude of engagements and assignments in Pillai's life, it's evident that he would not have had peace of mind, important to a responsible man, if not for his wife taking charge on the home front. He would have envisaged that this is crucial, of great importance, having the right woman by your side when embarking on an ambitious life journey. Pillai admits that, quote, "Wooing Shyamala was the first major challenge I had to overcome. I started pursuing her as soon as I set eyes on her." End quote. I believe we can call this deterministic romance. Pillai ends the book with the same question he asked at the start, whether his life made him a jack of all trades, but a master of none. Perhaps the answer lies in his own words, and I quote, "In my time, I have been a teacher, a journalist, a businessman, and a diplomat. I have participated and invested in my cultural community. Just as there are more stories I could tell, so too do our explanations lack definitive finality. There are always more angles for looking at life. Life with family, friends, struggles, accomplishment, and community is more than the eye can see. And it is this vastness which we struggle to comprehend that keeps us optimistic, humble, and enterprising. So for me, ladies and gentlemen, Gopinath Pillai is certainly not a jack of all trades or a master of none. The contents of this book provide evidence of his unique ability to coalesce a multitude of trades and traits and gain mastery of the outcome. In the words of former Prime Minister Goh Chok Tong, I quote, "Gopi, you succeed in whatever you take on because you have the passion and you drive it with passion." Thank you very much.
I will surely be fitter after this event. The next speaker has known Mr. Pillai perhaps for most of his life. I understand they were in St. Andrew's School together as well. Like Mr. Gopi, the next speaker also not only excelled in his profession, which is being a doctor, a cardiologist, and related to that he has and continues to sit in various committees, medical committees. But over and above, at the very early age of 31 or 32, he had become the president of the Singapore Kerala Association then. He was also the former president of GoPio, the global organization for people from Indian origin. He wears many hats, has his own brand of humor, and he is going to touch on personal anecdotes from a point of view of a person who has watched Mr. Pillai grow from one area to the other. With loads of pleasure, I invite Dr. V.P. Nair.
Right. I came rushing from the hospital today after doing a case, and on my way I forgot to take my glass, I forgot to take everything. So I borrowed a glass from my former, big boss in the catheter laboratory, and this is it. So I look at it, what I wrote. Right. President and members of SMA, fellow Singaporeans, friends, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know whether there are boys and girls here, boys and girls. After listening to the complete anecdote of the book, I may not touch at all about the book because you already know what it is, and I'll tell you what it's all about in a different way. I'm delighted to talk about Gopi, as I call him Gopi. Some of you call him uncle, some of you call him ambassador, whatever it is, I call him Gopi. And his recently published book, More Than the Eye Can See, Memoirs of Gopinath Pillai. Gopinath Pillaiയുടെ കണ്ണിന് കാണാൻ കഴിയുന്നതിലും കൂടുതൽ ഓർമ്മക്കുറിപ്പുകൾ സ്മൃതികൾ. Why I say സ്മൃതികൾ? Because in Sanskrit, സ്മൃതികൾ means something more than ഓർമ്മകൾ. Right. Now, the Straits Times published an article on the 9th of August last year, 22. I quote, "The Distinguished Service Order, the highest accolade given out this year, is awarded to veteran diplomat and former Indian Heritage Center Advisory Board Chairman, Gopinath Pillai, 84. At that time he was 84. As chairman of the Institute of South Asian Studies at the National University of Singapore, NUS, from 2004 to 21, Mr. Pillai played leading role in fostering Singapore-India relations by building up deep knowledge of India. He was also involved in various organizations that played a key role in Singapore's social development and held roles including as chairman of the Hindu Advisory Board from 90 to 99 and founding chairman of NTUC Fair Price Corporation from 83 to 93. I was at the Institute of South Asian Studies book discussion on More Than I Can See, Memoirs of Gopinath Pillai on 2nd September 22 at the Orchard Hotel. I enjoyed listening to the presentations by prominent speakers from Singapore, such as Prof. Ambassador Tommy Koh, former Foreign Minister Giorgio, and the former president of ALNUS College, Professor Tan Taeyong, and the chief mentor of Confederation of Indian Industry, Tarun Das, who happened to be my friend also. Because I presented something in PBD and Tarun Das was chairing the meeting when Modi was the Prime Minister. So Prof. Tomiko said something very important. He knew Gopi for 63 years, much more than all of you knew. And he was surprised to know that I knew Gopi for 65 years, something different from the St. Andrews school days. And Tomiko came and told me, oh, you know him more than what I know. I have also written a book, Healing Hearts, Touching Minds, The Journey of an Interventional Cardiologist, which was launched by Minister Tan See Leng. The foreword was written by Minister Kwa Boon Wan, and more important, Gopi wrote an excellent review as follows. No one has succeeded in providing a review that does justice to all the classics of Indian literature. And similarly, I will not even attempt to write a review of your monumental work of 650 pages in 60 chapters, dealing with medicine, health, Indian culture, religion, art, history, and a whole host of other serious subjects. While we were in St. Andrews School, that's very important, I had no idea that there was a warehouse of knowledge and insight right next to me. He used to sit next to me, or I used to sit next to him. Today, of course, with your great piece of work covering a wide range of subjects and presenting your learning and reflections, this is apparent. We will take it in small bites, but I am sure we will enjoy it all the same. My hearty congratulations for a job well done. Let me emphasize that Ambassador Gopinath Pillai, or Gopi, is an intellectual. I call him a great intellectual with great leadership qualities. You can see the various awards he has received, such as Padma Shri from India, National Day Award from NTUC, Friend of Labour Award, Distinguished Alumni Award from Singapore University, now known as National University of Singapore, and Public Service Star BBM. Mr. Goh Chok Tong, the Emeritus Senior Minister and former Prime Minister of Singapore, mentioned in the foreword of this book that More Than I Can See tells the story of Gopinath Pillai, a Singaporean businessman and diplomat who served as Singapore's ambassador and High Commissioners to Iran and Pakistan. Gopi worked along with prominent members of Singapore's pioneering generation to strengthen Singapore's manufacturing profile and international trade. Gopi broke into liberalizing India as a trailblazing entrepreneur and contributed to the nation's public life as the first chairman of NTUC Fair Price and founder chairman of ISAS. His father, K.S. Pillai, those who don't know his full name, Krishnan Sukumaran Pillai, a journalist who ran a daily Kerala Bandhu, known to be the first only Malayalam language daily published outside India. When Mr. Devan Nair was the president, he asked me, what has happened to Kerala Bandhu? I said, it's a natural death. You mean they became Kerala Jandu? Now, his mother, Maladi Menon, you may not know that she was Maladi Menon, who after marrying Mr. Pillai became Maladi Pillai. Wife Shamala, who is sitting here, Children, Preeta, Prakash, Priya, daughter-in-law Vidya Nair, grandchildren Arjun and Aditya, and son-in-law Bhaskaran are very dear to our family. In fact, Prakash and my son Dinesh were classmates from kindergarten school right up to junior college, even though they took art and science in a different way. The book is well written, easily readable, and full of knowledge about early and current Singapore, including politics, economics, and culture. Gopi has contributed tremendous help and service to the Indian community and advice to the Indian community, especially the Malayalee community. I would recommend this book to be kept in all Indian households in Singapore. Thank you. With this part, I thank you. Yes. Thank you very much for lending me.
Well, he's a doctor, he will know how he needs. The next speaker also doesn't need any introduction. Well known to all of you. He wears many hats. He's a grassroots leader, former president of Singapore Malayalee Association, and current president of the Singapore Malayalee Hindu Samajam. He has worked with Mr. Pillai on several fronts, and to hear his sharing in Malayalam, I invite Mr. Jayakumar.
Namaskaram. Good afternoon to all of you. Let me say in Malayalam, sorry for those who don't understand. Please excuse me. Auntie Shamala, Mrs. Gopinath Pillai, children, son Prakash. Just now, Mr. Dr. V.P. Nair and Vishwasadashan, എല്ലാവരും ബുക്കിനെ പറ്റിയും അവരുടെ അനുഭവങ്ങളെ പറ്റിയും പറഞ്ഞു. എനിക്ക് ഐ നോ ഹിം ഫ്രം 2003 ഓൺവേഴ്സ്. ബിഫോർ ദാറ്റ് എനിക്ക് അറിയാമായിരുന്നെങ്കിലും ഐ എം വെരി ക്ലോസ് ടു ഹിം ഓൺ 2003 ഓൺവേഴ്സ് വെൻ ഐ സ്റ്റാർട്ടഡ് വർക്കിംഗ് ഇൻ മലയാളി അസോസിയേറ്റ് വിത്ത് മലയാളി അസോസിയേഷൻ. ഒരുപാട് കാര്യങ്ങൾ നേരത്തെ സുനു പറഞ്ഞതുപോലെ നോട്ട് എ ക്വാണ്ടിറ്റി, ക്വാളിറ്റി. ഓൾവേസ് ഹി മെൻഷൻ അബൌട്ട് ക്വാളിറ്റി. എപ്പോഴും ക്വാളിറ്റി ആയിട്ട് ചെയ്യണമെന്ന് മാത്രമാണ് അദ്ദേഹം പറഞ്ഞിരുന്നത്. ഒരുപാട് കാര്യങ്ങൾ ചെയ്യേണ്ട, കുറച്ച് കാര്യങ്ങൾ ചെയ്താൽ മതി. ബട്ട് അത് നമ്മുടെ കമ്മ്യൂണിറ്റിക്ക് ബെനിഫിറ്റ് ആവണം. അതുപോലെ ഇന്ത്യൻ കമ്മ്യൂണിറ്റിക്ക് സിംഗപ്പൂരിൻ്റെ ഏത് ലെവലാണ് അത് നമ്മൾ ചെയ്യണമെന്നാണ് എപ്പോഴും അദ്ദേഹം നമുക്ക് ഉപദേശം തന്നിരുന്നത്. He is a mentor to us, not only mentor, advisor, and many has he fought for the Indian community, especially Malayali community. അദ്ദേഹമായിട്ട് എനിക്ക് ധാരാളം കാര്യങ്ങൾ ഒരുമിച്ച് ചെയ്യാൻ കഴിഞ്ഞു. When I was the president, before that Mr. Dola was the president there, അപ്പോൾ ബിൽഡിംഗ് ഫണ്ട് റേസ് ചെയ്യണമായിരുന്നു. Not easy to raise fund from Malayali community, but with the help of Gopinath Pillai, നമ്മൾ പറഞ്ഞു, സാർ നമുക്കൊരു ഗസ്റ്റ് ഓഫ് ഓണർ, either politician or some high level, ഒരു ഗസ്റ്റ് ഓഫ് ഓണർ കിട്ടിയാൽ we can raise fund because of the guest of honor name. അങ്ങനെ അദ്ദേഹം പറഞ്ഞു, okay, I will get for you Singapore president, that time Pesanadan, provided you must follow the protocol. Governor Palasan എപ്പോഴും പ്രോട്ടോകോൾ അനുസരിച്ച്. I think when we do things, we must do the best way and the maximum quality we must provide. So our community was Ullas and കേൾക്കാൻ വയ്യ. Sorry. I think all of you can hear, is that? Okay. അദ്ദേഹം സ്പെഷ്യലി മെൻഷൻ ചെയ്തു, നിങ്ങൾ പ്രോട്ടോകോൾ ചെയ്യുകയാണെങ്കിൽ തീർച്ചയായിട്ടും ഐ ഗെറ്റ് ഗസ്റ്റ് ഓഫ് ഓണർ മിസ്റ്റർ. അങ്ങനെ അന്ന് റീത്ത രാമ, ഐ തിങ്ക് ഷീ ഈസ് ഹിയർ, നോ, ഷീ വാസ് ദ വൺ ലുക്ക് അഫ്റ്റർ ദ പ്രസിഡൻസ് വിസിറ്റ്. നല്ലവണ്ണം ഗോപിനാഥ് പിള്ള സാറിന് കൊടുത്തപ്പോൾ അദ്ദേഹം പറഞ്ഞു, ഇറ്റ്സ് വെരി ഗുഡ്, സോ യു ക്യാൻ ക്യാരി ഓൺ, I will invite him. Finally, he came, we raised the fund and we completed the building. I think Dola sir and Koshi sir was there. We did the building completely. So he was the anchor man for that, and I have to thank him, thank Gopinath Pillai for that. And so many advices he gave. A lot of programs he did, he said, no, quality. That is the most important in the life. And I was there in 2000, because just now Vishwa mentioned Kerala Association was formed in 2017. The 100 years, 2017 is the 100 years. That time is Singapore Malayalee Association. We did the 100-year celebration. We approached Gopinath Pillai. Gopinath Pillai sir said, okay, I will call Prime Minister. If he is free, definitely he will come and do the 100-year celebration. അങ്ങനെ അദ്ദേഹം പ്രൈം മിനിസ്റ്റർ വിളിക്കും, പ്രൈം മിനിസ്റ്റർ എഗ്രി ചെയ്യും. അങ്ങനെ നമ്മൾ പ്രൈം മിനിസ്റ്റർ വെച്ച് 100 years സെലിബ്രേറ്റ് ചെയ്തു. ഇതിൻ്റെ എല്ലാം ആങ്കർമാൻ ഗോപിനാഥ് പിള്ള സാറായിരുന്നു. കൂടാതെ എപ്പോഴും നമ്മൾ വീട്ടിൽ ചെല്ലുമായിരുന്നു. എപ്പോഴും നമ്മൾ വീട്ടിൽ ചെല്ലുമ്പോഴെല്ലാം എനിക്കൊരു വിഷമമുണ്ട്. ആൻറ്റി ചായ വട ഇതെല്ലാം എപ്പോഴും തരുമായിരുന്നു. ബട്ട് ഷി വാസ് സോ ഹാപ്പി ടു ഗിവ് അസ് ദ കോഫി ആൻഡ് ടീ, ആൻഡ് സംടൈംസ് ഷി പാർട്ടിസിപ്പേറ്റ് വിത്ത് അസ്. ചിലപ്പോൾ നമ്മളോട് ഇരിക്കും, ചിലപ്പോൾ ഇരിക്കില്ല. ബട്ട് ഷി വാസ് വെരി ഹാപ്പി ടു അക്കോമഡേറ്റ് അസ്, ആൻഡ് ഷി ഗിവ് അസ് her ideas also. So actually it was a family association for Singapore Malayalee Association, and the uncle was helping a lot of things for us, and it motivate. Now the new president, Mr. Prem, not here, and Sunu, we went there and talked to him. He gave us a lot of ideas how to do, how to go through the community, how to go, not only Malayali, you must bring all the Indian community together. His idea was to bring all Indian together, and the Malayali must accept. That's his idea, and we try our best to do it. Still, the present committee also doing. I have to thank the present committee to bring all the Malayali association together to organize his book discussion about the book. Thank you so much for the Malayali community to organize this. Another thing, just now Vishwa mentioned about astrology. I think he is very devoted to the, especially the Chakulatamman. He was very devoted to, just now the montage they show the Chakulatamman picture, and Sujata and Isya was helping to bring uncle always in the Chakulatamman and Magaravalakka. So it was a collaboration with all these association to bring all these people to the Magaravalakka and Chakulatamman celebrations are. Finally happened, after Dr. V.P. Nair, he stepped down, I have to take over the Malayali Hindu Samajam presidency. So I took over 2020, the presidency of Malayali Hindu Samajam. Still I am the president. So the Malayali Hindu Samajam formed in 1926. They formed in 1926, going to be 100 year 2026. So their intention was to get a temple, Malayali temple in Singapore, Ayyappan Guru Ayyappan temple. That's the idea, and he worked for that. Not only the previous committees also worked for that, even Dr. V.P. also tried to get the temple a reality. He worked very hard. Finally, I have to thank Mr. Gopinath Pillai. He is the man behind to get the temple reality. Finally, I'm very glad to tell all of you, we got a place in Yishun to build Ayyappan Guru Ayyappan temple. I have to thank Gopinath Pillai for that, because his ambition was that finally we made it. because of his involvement and his negotiation with the Singapore Land Authority and the ministers, finally we got it. So how much involved in the, just now Governor Pillai and Dr. VP, no, Mr. Vishwa and Dr. VP mentioned how integrated with all this ministerial level and the diplomat, all these things, still he find time to look after the family, important, same time the community. He always in the heart, the community must come up. Then only some values for our Singapore system. So he always looked for that and he did it, and finally we achieved that thing. So many things I can say. To me, he's a mentor and advisor, everything. I'm here because of his advice to me. Thank you so much, and thank you all the family members of Gopinath Pillai. Thank you so much. I think you are very honored to be here because of Gopinath Pillai. I think always everybody remember him, and he won. I pray for his speedy recovery from the current situation. We can pray together and get him soon come out. And thank you so much for organizing. Thank you everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Jay Kumar. The next speaker, in the community we call him Mr. Constitution. Because virtually all the Malayalee organizations' constitution, he had a role to play. When we want to change, we call him. When we create new, we will call him. He's been involved in NUS Alumni Society, former nominated Member of Parliament, continues to excel in his career, but always finds time to help organizations that need help. Pleased to invite Mr. Chandra Mohan to address us.
Very good afternoon to all, and especially to Madam Shamla, Mrs. Gopinath Pillai, and family members, and also to John Waiter for writing, together with Gopi, this lovely book. I read this book, I think 1.5 times, I would say. I read with pleasure, with sadness, happiness, and great memory of a lot of things, because I knew Gopi for 45 years. And I wish to say also, in the present, we wish him a speedy recovery and hope that he will lead soon a healthy, happy, and joyous life with his dear wife and family in the years to come. I first met Gopi when I joined the then University of Singapore Society in the late 1970s, after having graduated in 1976. And this was located in Bukit Timah campus in a very old bungalow in the precinct of the University of Singapore then, along Evans Road. I'm saying this because along that road, you also find a college called Yusuf College, where Shamla was a resident. And Gopi was a resident in Raffles Hall, which is in between that area in Botanic Gardens, if you know the area. It's important for me to say this with some pleasure, because Evans Road is in between Yusuf College and Raffles Hall. And the romance of it all is, of course, before that, and I want to relate that because it connects with Shamla too. A lady who has made supreme sacrifices with her talent, and Gopi even mentions in his books she was such a bright lady, much brighter than him. There's some quotation there, but I won't quote about this, but the sacrifice made by the wife, like many of us, our spouses, they make supreme sacrifices to see their sort of the husband progressing on. But and every successful man, there's this strong woman most of the time. My first impression when I met Gopi was that he was a very warm-hearted senior graduate committee member of Singapore University Graduate Society. And he had no air about him. And he welcomed young people for succession, only to find out later that he made sure that we stuck around so that he could guide them and he could move on to his own activities beyond just university activities. But one of his first loves was, I think, the university society, which he built together with his very good friend called Mr. Ernest Wong. And two of them I would consider most of the time as to be the father of the Guild House. And he built it in the interests of, and paramount interest of the graduate body, which has culminated to what it is today. When he started it, it was only about 1,000 members. Today it's about 15 to 16,000 members. And thanks to Gopi, he was really instrumental in making sure of the growth of the membership, and most importantly, in building the structure that we have. And actually we can be very proud of it, because not many university alumni has got that kind of structure that you find in Cambridge Guild House. He was always interested in advancing the objective of NUSS, which was for the paramount interest and the growth of the university itself. Gopi was once the president from 1977 to 79, and for many years an active committee member. I think he served no less than about 7 terms. That's about 14 years. And that's a very long time for voluntary service. And he was very actively involved in the construction of the then new Guild House at Cambridge campus. And now it's called, of course, NUS. It's a combination of the University of Singapore and Nanyang University, Nanta they call it, which is now the National University of Singapore. And you still have the NTU and the other university that has come up over the last few years. In the early 1970s, University of Singapore Society was not very popular with the then Vice Chancellor. You might remember Toh Chin Chai, who was the chairman of the PAP, and he was the Vice Chancellor in the late 60s to sometime in the mid 70s. And at one stage, the Guild House had some problems with the university, where we almost had to give up the premises at Evans Road. And Gopi, being the smart diplomat that he was, together with this gentleman I mentioned, Ernest Wong, and his good friend Herman Hotstad, who was once a permanent secretary also, and a few senior members persuaded one gentleman to take up the position of president. So you can see Gopi's mind, how it works in the paramount interests of the society. And he got Professor Maurice Baker, who was then the head of the English department of the University of Singapore, to become the president so that he could deal with Dr. Toh Chin Chai, who was a vice chancellor. And he managed it somehow. He cajoled Maurice Baker, but Maurice Baker told him that if you want me to be the president, I need a good vice president, and poor Gopi had to become the vice president, and he did all the work behind the scenes. But Maurice Baker managed, because Maurice Baker was very close to Toh Chin Chai and to Lee Kuan Yew, etc. So, and you might remember he was once an ambassador to I think India, to Malaysia, etc. And we managed, and I'm just giving the history of it to show how Gopi, his commitment was really fantastic. With the little that he had, but he managed to cajole. He had the power to somehow get the right people to do the right thing with the right objective. And he was a good man, and we always remember Gopi, even till today, when I'm fairly active in the University Society because of Gopi, and we always remember fondly Gopi, and he has come for many a function together with Shamla over the years, and I hope soon he will recover and he'll be back. When I became a committee member in the early 80s, Gopi was then a very senior member in the committee. He asked me, Chandramohan, what do you do? I said, I'm a young lawyer. He said, good, you'll be our legal advisor, but you cannot charge us. I said, fine, no problem. He said, what else do you do? I said, I was quite active in sports. He said, very good, you're my sports chairman. And I realized suddenly that whenever you say something, you're in trouble. No? They say, what else do you do? I say, sir, nothing else. And Gopi had a way with his way of talking and cajoling. He's a romantic, I mean, Shamla will tell you that, I think. But he had a way with people. He knew how to goreng them, so to speak, But always with good intentions. And that's what I like about the man. And years later, he'll ask me to get more involved in various activities, including Hindu Samajam, Malayalee Association, etc. But I did not fall into that trap anymore. So once he asked me, and with my late brother, Venugopal, whose daughter is here, Vidya is here, and he used to say, Chandramohan, can you get involved in this committee, that committee, B.G. Lee is coming to be the Deputy Prime Minister, etc. I said, Gopi, you just get involved with Venu, my brother, leave me alone, because I got Law Society, I got NUSS, etc., etc. But he meant well. He wanted people to get involved, not because I'm a very religious personality, but he says, look, I think you can do the job, do it. I said, I'll do it behind the scenes. So he always had that power to cajole and influence, and I got involved with Malayalee Association at least, and also because of Mr. MPD Nair, you'll remember some of these people, and they were all very involved. And he'll say, you get involved with this and that, you can get involved with Law Society, Cricket Club if you want to, but don't forget your community. And actually, to be fair to him, he also gets involved. He's either the patron or advisor, or in some form, he'll always be there. Some spouses might complain, including my late wife, Gauri, used to say, you're always getting involved in all these things. So what I did was I got her involved too, by being in some of the subcommittees, etc. And she found that it was quite interesting. So I learned from Gopi how to cajole others to do the job also. And after a while, they appreciate it also. So it's a matter of all of us wanting to get involved in honorable tasks that is important for the community and not just the country alone. And because of him, I had to serve as honorary secretary for, mind you, for at least about 12 years. And I wondered really how he could mesmerize me to doing that, because every time I wanted to give up, he'll be hanging around somewhere and he'll say, you carry on one more year, please, one more year. And you just fall for it. So Gopi had the power and the charisma to not just be an ambassador for the country, but ambassador for various institutions, including a lot of Malayali organizations. And there came a time in Gill House where you can find the talent in Gopi also, and how he mesmerizes crowds to support. He had to build the Gill House. Cambridge had given us a space, an area, free of charge actually, and leased for 30 years, but without any building. So we had to build. And at that time we had less than 1,000 members, and he managed to raise the entrance fee from about $15 or $20 to $1,000. And within a few weeks, we got 1,000 members. Why? He got architects to build a structure and say, this is how the Gill House is going to be. And 1,000 members joined us, because that's the Singapore crowd. If there's something at stake, they'll join, And we raised $1 million. We needed about $5-6 million. The following year, we raised it to 2,000. Another 1,000 joined us. The third year, we raised it to another 1,000 to 3,000. Another 1,000 joined us. We made up, and we had $6 million. and we decided to give back to the bank, I think DBS Bank. They said, no, you don't have to give back so early, they wanted the interest. But till today, they are bankers, So, you see, Gopi and his good friends knew what to do, and as a result of that, I'm saying this story because I think that's what our Malayali associations should be doing also. And I think the Hindu Samajam is doing that, and I hope they'll be successful. So I think the power of advisors and good people who are willing to back us is very important, and I hope that continues too. And today we have something like 15,000 members compared to 1,000 members when I was a young member then. Gopi over the decades had these cool, charming, kind ways to entice one to do voluntary work. And as we became friends, he wanted me to take on other roles. So I told him that I have limited time, and but I will always be somewhere in the background, which I've done till today. The man was born in 37, let's express 1937 in Rangoon Road. He was brought up, and in Kerala, he was in the book. He talks about his uncle, who was very much a politician, and he had leanings to be, I think, a socialist, very much active in student politics, but decided not to go into full-time politics. I think Vishwa has expressed all those things in the books, and it's very well written there. And it's interesting reading that because we can relate to that, because it was during our younger days and later on in life, some of the things that he mentions, it sinks into our brains. And he's a man who's really contributed in many aspects of Singapore life. Very active student union work, publications, drama. He loved drama and acting, loves poetry, teaching, journalists, NGO work, governmental organization, ambassadorial work, being the ambassador of Iran, Pakistan, and ambassador at large. He's one of the few who's the ambassador at large. Government companies like Intraco, NTUC, FairPrice, industrial entrepreneur, and ventured into corporate portfolios in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, in banking, and India. He's a very versatile man who has contributed so much, and of course in the Indian organization, SMA and Hindu Samajam, etc. Once I asked him, Gopi, which was your favorite country? And he told me the beauty of Iran and Persia. I think that was his favorite. I think he loved being the ambassador to Iran. And he could quote verses. I think he's into Sanskrit also. So he had a talent in that. And I think the ministers all appreciated how he could sway the crowd by saying a few pieces, poetry or whatever. And I think that makes a difference because it touches the heart of people, and he's always been very successful in that, and he continues to do so. Over the years, I was privileged to get to know Shamla, and they've raised 3 lovely children in Preetha, Prakash, and Priya. And I'm so proud Vidya is part of the family too. And from what I read of the book, he quoted Shamla from first year in University of Malaya, and both of them were in the arts faculty. She stayed in Yusuf College subsequently, and Gopi was at Raffles Hall. And I want to quote from Gopi at page 72. He shows the romance of it all. As our relationship developed, quote, I found Shamla to be a gentle and caring person. She was also intelligent and probably could have gone further in her education had it not been for me constantly distracting her. I tended to be hot-headed. She was my exact opposite. Even till today, after almost 60 years of marriage, she remains my alter ego, my better half, and that says it all. The romance between Shamla and Gopi. Gopi has led a good, meaningful life, and now is into his mid-80s. I can proudly say he has been a very good and generous son to his family and to Singapore. I would like to sincerely say a big thank you to Gopi for all his generous ways and guidance and leadership. So on that note, I would like to wish Gopi all the very best, and we hope to see him active again in the days to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chandra. Next, we have a person who is very actively involved in grassroots work in the northern part of Singapore. He was the former president of Narayana Gurukulam, current president of Sri Narayana Mission, and also the Malayalam Language Education Society. Pleasure to invite Jaydev Unithan.
നമസ്കാരം. പത്മശ്രീ ഗോപിനാഥ് പിള്ള സിംഗപ്പൂർ മലയാളി തറവാട്ടിലെ കാരണവർ എന്ന് നമുക്ക് പറയാം. സിംഗപ്പൂർ മലയാളി സംഘടനകളിൽ ഭൂരിഭാഗവും അദ്ദേഹത്തെ രക്ഷാധികാരിയായോ ഉപദേശകനായോ ആയി നിയമിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ട്. മലയാളം ലാംഗ്വേജ് എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ സൊസൈറ്റി സിംഗപ്പൂർ അഥവാ MLES സ്ഥാപിക്കുന്നതിൽ പ്രധാന പങ്ക് വഹിച്ച അദ്ദേഹം അതിൻ്റെ ആദ്യ സ്ഥാപക അംഗവും ഉപദേശകനുമായിരുന്നു. സിംഗപ്പൂരിൽ മലയാള ഭാഷ സംരക്ഷിക്കേണ്ടതിൻ്റെ പ്രാധാന്യം ശ്രീ ഗോപിനാഥ് അവർകൾ മനസ്സിലാക്കി. ഈ ശ്രമത്തിൽ ശ്രദ്ധ കേന്ദ്രീകരിക്കേണ്ട ഒരു സംഘടനയുടെ ആവശ്യകത അദ്ദേഹം കണ്ടു. കഴിഞ്ഞ 10 വർഷങ്ങളിൽ MLES നടത്തിയ ഭാഷാ പരിപാടികളിൽ 1000-ലധികം കുട്ടികളും യുവാക്കളും മുതിർന്നവരും പങ്കെടുത്തു. MLES ശ്രീ ഗോപിനാഥ് പിള്ള അവர்களോട് കടപ്പെട്ടിരിക്കുന്നു. അദ്ദേഹത്തിന് നല്ല ആരോഗ്യം നേരുന്നു. In the last decade, I had the opportunity to engage and interact closely with Sri Gopinath Pillai, or Uncle Gopinath, as some of us refer to him. It was my good fortune to work with Uncle Gopinath to set up the Malayalam Language Education Society Singapore, or MLES, in 2009. The origins of MLES can be traced to a group of parents who wanted their children to learn Malayalam in a school setting with a structured syllabus. This ground-up initiative took birth in the early 2000s. They approached several Singapore Malayali organizations but offered a structured program. The parents were then advised to seek the advice of Mr. Gopinath Pillai. Uncle Gopinath was impressed with the enthusiasm and commitment demonstrated by these parents. He proposed that an organization that focused on promoting Malayalam language and extending financial support to needy students for this purpose be set up. MLES became a registered society in 2010. He became the first founder member and chief advisor of MLES. I vividly remember an episode during the inauguration ceremony of MLES in 2010. A gentleman came up to me and handed over an envelope containing a substantial amount of money. He said that this was a donation to MLES. He was reciprocating a donation given by Mr. Gopinath Pillai in his personal capacity during the launch of the Hindi Society in Singapore decades ago. Uncle Gopinath's personal gesture of kindness has benefited the Malayali community in Singapore. The title of leader of the Malayali community in Singapore is befitting Uncle Gopinath. The management committee of MLES appreciated Uncle Gopinath's vision of establishing an organization for the sole purpose of promoting Malayalam language. After our interaction with Malayali organizations in the UK, we understood why Uncle had prompted us or encouraged us to set up an organization for this sole purpose, because many of the organizations were predominantly focused in organizing social and cultural activities and not the language. MLES continues to promote the Malayalam language in Singapore by providing structured classes for children and conversational classes for youth in Singapore. We are also working with other Malayali organizations in Singapore to promote the language through their activities by providing a framework. MLES is privileged to have Uncle Gopinath as our guide, and we are a beneficiary of his grand vision, more than the eye can see. We wish him the very best in health, and our very best wishes to Mrs. Gopinath Pillai and the family. Thank you very much.
Right. As we have heard, Mr. Pillai has worn several hats, and this has always been tracked by a particular group of people called journalists. And they have the insight into his long history and particular interviews with him where he has shared special moments. One such journalist is with us here today. My pleasure to invite Mr. Suresh.
Hi, afternoon. I come with a stick. I come with a mask. In fact, I told Sunu that I came here 2-3 weeks ago. I was the only one here because when this event was called off or postponed because of other reasons, I was not informed. But that's the secondary. I will probably be one of the rare non-Malayali, what do you call, guys involved in the whole thing. I'm in my mid-60s. I spent half my life at the Singapore Recreation Club. My dad was very much involved with what do you call, the then Kerala Association, the Singapore Malayalee Hindu Samajam, and almost every other things. But somehow I felt, and I'm sure most youngsters will feel, that as what Lee Kuan Yew always said, this is not a Chinese or an Indian or a Malay state. This is a Singapore multiracial state. But we have endeavored, Gopinath has also endeavored very much, right, the importance again of maintaining, I won't say the grassroots or otherwise. In fact, he was actually commended with the Padma Shri. He was commended for his extraordinary role, right, in bonding both Singapore and India together. And much as I'm sure he's hearing at home, he's not feeling too well, right? But His Excellency Gopinath, right, will always be remembered for more than a diplomat. As a journalist, I'll tell you, for all his credentials, if ever there was a Malayali president, it would have been President Gopinath Pillai. Because he had the class, he had the foresight, he could see more than the eye could see, right? And traveling almost everywhere, right? He brings a different flavor, right, to what Indians are. Again, commendably, I think Malayalis are unique in a different way because despite the whole of India, my dad used to tell me many times, in your whole lifetime, you can't even backpack around the whole of Kerala to show, right, how large the place is and the whole works. But it's individuals like that, right? Gopinath Pillai, right? Many other Malayalis, even those have risen to be MPs, NMPs. We have Biswa here, we have Chandramohan here. I'm glad voted in, we have Vikram Nair. Right? There are differing roles Malayalis can play. And play as a Malayali Singaporean, that's more important. That's what His Excellency always says, it's quality, never the quantity. Right? So in organizing events like this, it counts a lot. Right? Getting all together, right? Paying tribute to distinguished Malayalis who have done commendable job in raising the status of Singaporean Malayalis. May I again congratulate His Excellency Gopinath Pillai. Right? You have been a wonder all the way through, and I'm sure as you recover at home, your family is here. Right? We will take pride that you have done the best and you have been a real pride to Singapore. Congratulations, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Suresh, from your heart. We appreciate that. Kerala Bandhu was the publication that Mr. Pillai's father started. But over the years, we've had several publications, even a daily newspaper, Malaysia Malayalee at that time. And over the years, at some stage, all of that stopped. And suddenly a new one propped up called Pravasi. And the person responsible for that is here. And he wishes to share some of that interaction he had when starting that newspaper. Can I invite Rajesh?
എല്ലാവർക്കും നമസ്കാരം. ഞാൻ മലയാളത്തിൽ തന്നെ പറയാം. ഞാൻ 2012 പ്രവാസി എക്സ്പ്രസ് തുടങ്ങുന്നത്. 2012 ഞാൻ പ്രവാസി എക്സ്പ്രസ് തുടങ്ങുമ്പോൾ ഞാൻ അതിൻ്റെ ചരിത്രം, സിംഗപ്പൂരിൽ എന്താണ് മലയാളം പത്രം അല്ലെങ്കിൽ പത്രം സിംഗപ്പൂരിൽ എന്താണ് എന്ന് പഠിക്കാൻ ശ്രമിച്ചായിരുന്നു. അപ്പോൾ എനിക്ക് മനസ്സിലായത് ഇതിൽ ഒറിജിനേറ്റർ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് കേരള ബന്ധുവാണ്. ഫസ്റ്റ് മലയാള പത്രം. ഫസ്റ്റ് ഓഫ് ഓൾ ഇറ്റ്സ് സ്റ്റാർട്ടഡ് ഫ്രം കേരള ബന്ധു എന്നുള്ള ന്യൂസ് പേപ്പർ കേരളത്തിന് പുറത്ത് ആദ്യമായിട്ട് ഒരു മലയാള പത്രം ബോംബെയിൽ കൂടെ വന്നപ്പോൾ പത്രം വന്നിട്ടില്ല. ആദ്യമായിട്ടൊരു പത്രം തുടങ്ങുന്നത് സിംഗപ്പൂരിലാണ്. അത് തുടങ്ങിയത് ഗോപിനാഥ് പിള്ളയുടെ അച്ഛൻ KS പിള്ളയാണ്. അപ്പോൾ അങ്ങനെയുള്ള വിവരം കിട്ടി. അപ്പോഴാണ് അദ്ദേഹത്തിന് പത്മശ്രീ കിട്ടിയ കാര്യം എനിക്ക് മനസ്സിലായത്. എനിക്ക് അദ്ദേഹത്തിന് ഡയറക്റ്റ് ആക്സസിലായിരുന്നു. അദ്ദേഹത്തിനെ ഹോണർ ചെയ്യുന്ന ചടങ്ങിൽ ഐ കുഡ് ടേക്ക് എ ടിക്കറ്റ്, ഐ കുഡ് മീറ്റ് ഹിം, ദെൻ ഐ ഹാൻഡ് ഷേക്ക് വിത്ത് ഹിം ആൻഡ് ഐ ആസ്ക്ഡ് ഹിം മൈ അപ്പോയിൻമെൻറ്റ്. ഓക്കെ, ഹി റെഡിലി അഗ്രീഡ്. He asked me to come to his office. So then I discussed my plan. I have an idea about starting a newspaper. So he said, okay. Then he was asking a certain number of questions. So I think I could convince him. And he was almost like a mentor for Pravasi Express. Pravasi Express വേണ്ട നിർദ്ദേശങ്ങളും ഓരോ സമയത്തും വേണ്ട കാര്യങ്ങളും എല്ലാ ഞാൻ ചെയ്തിട്ടുള്ള എന്തെങ്കിലും സീരിയസ് കാര്യങ്ങളുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ അതെല്ലാം ഞാൻ ഗോപിനാഥ് അങ്കിളിനോട് സംസാരിച്ചിട്ടേ ചെയ്തിട്ടുള്ളൂ. ഈവൻ എൻ്റെ ആനുവൽ ഡേ ഇവൻറ്റ്സ്, വാർഡ് സെറമണീസ്. ഗോപിനാഥ് അങ്കിൾ ടു ഹാവ് ഹീസ് ഓൺ നോമിനീസ് ഫോർ അവാർഡ്സ്. സോ സീ ദാറ്റ് നമ്മുടെ പുതുച്ചേരി മിനിസ്റ്റർ പുതുച്ചേരിയുടെ ഡാഡ്, he was the first appearing in a public event in Pravasi Express Act. So like that, a lot of interventions. So he used to do it. So he know that you need media also in society for betterment of community. Somebody have to report facts and figures. So in court, the first heart, he is a journalist. So his first job is as a journalist. I asked him why you didn't continue journalism. So what he told me that, okay, journalism will not feed you. So അപ്പോൾ അതാണ് ഇതുകൊണ്ടൊന്നും പറ്റത്തില്ല. So for me also he advised that it should be sustainable model, then only you can run this through. So focus on that. But I don't think so. But we run as a community newspaper. We are not commercial. We are just standing for community. And we could do a lot of intervention through Gopinath Pillai. most of the things we had his approvals, major, especially the major things. അപ്പം അങ്ങനെ എനിക്കെന്നും എന്തെങ്കിലും ഒരു കാര്യമുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ like I could have called him and he will pick it up. Even he is traveling in US, he used to pick it up call. So that's somehow I don't know, I'm not a big guy or something because he know the intention of what I'm doing. So he used to support me. So you can see throughout all the major events, he'll be there. So I'm thanking Andy also. So both of you are always bless me. Thank you for all the support, and I will wish him a speedy recovery. Yeah.
Well, for those who don't know, we have a very old Malayali organization called the Singapore Candidly which used to specialize in dramas. Now, Rajesh, who just spoke, was instrumental in reviving that organization. Today, it has become active again, and the current president of the Candidly is here, Gangadharan. I invite you to share your thoughts.
സദസ്സിലിരിക്കുന്ന എല്ലാവർക്കും നമസ്കാരം. ഇന്ന് ഞാൻ ഇവിടെ കൈരളി കലാനിലയത്തിന് ഗോപിനാഥ് സാറ് തന്ന സംഭാവന മാത്രം സൂചിപ്പിക്കുകയാണ്. കാരണം നിങ്ങൾക്കെല്ലാം അറിയാം, കൈരളി കലാനിലയം സ്ഥാപിച്ചത് 1956 അത് നാടകം പ്രധാന ലക്ഷ്യമൊക്കെ അത് എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നു 1990 ശേഷം അത് നിലച്ചുപോയി, അതിൻ്റെ പ്രവർത്തനം നിലച്ചുപോയി. അന്ന് നാടകം കാണാൻ പിറകിലിരുന്ന് ഞാൻ ഇന്ന് അതിൻ്റെ എന്താ പറയണ്ടേ ആ സംഘടനയുടെ ഒരു അംഗമായിട്ട് ഇവിടെ നിങ്ങളുടെ മുന്നിൽ നിൽക്കുകയാണ്. അന്ന് ഒരു ഭാഗ്യം എന്താണെന്ന് എനിക്കറിയില്ല. അതിനുശേഷം 2013 ശേഷം പ്രവാസി എക്സ്പ്രസ് ഗോപിനാഥ് പിള്ള സാറുമായിട്ട് ഒരു ഇൻ്റർവ്യൂ, അത് ഹെറിറ്റേജിൻ്റെ ഭാഗമായിട്ട് ചെയ്ത ഒരു ഇൻ്റർവ്യൂയുടെ ഭാഗമായിട്ട് ആണ് കൈരളി കലാനിലയത്തെക്കുറിച്ചുള്ള പുതിയ അതിനെങ്ങനെ പുനരുദ്ധരിക്കാം എന്നുള്ള രീതിയിലൊരു ചർച്ച വരുന്നതും അന്ന് സംസാരിച്ചപ്പോൾ അദ്ദേഹം പറഞ്ഞത് ധൈര്യമുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ മാത്രം ചെയ്യുക, മാത്രമല്ല ഇതിനെ വെളിയിൽ കളയാൻ പാടില്ല, അതിനെ കൊല്ലാൻ പാടില്ല, വീണ്ടും കൊല്ലാൻ പാടില്ല, നടത്തുന്നെങ്കിൽ കൃത്യമായിട്ട് ചെയ്യുക. അപ്പോൾ അതിന് താല്പര്യമുണ്ടോ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അതിന് നിങ്ങൾക്ക് കഴിയുമോ എന്ന് നിങ്ങൾ നോക്കുക, അതിനുശേഷം മാത്രം മുന്നോട്ട് പോവുക. പക്ഷെ അന്ന് അദ്ദേഹം കുറച്ച് മാർഗരേഖകൾ തന്നിട്ടുണ്ട് എങ്ങനെ ചെയ്യണം. അതിൽ ആർട്ട്, കൾച്ചർ, പിന്നെ വരുന്ന ലിറ്ററേച്ചറാണ്. അപ്പോൾ ലിറ്ററേച്ചറിൻ്റെ ഭാഗമായിട്ട് ഞാനും അതിൻ്റെ ഭാഗമായിട്ട് ഇപ്പോൾ പ്രവർത്തിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. പിന്നെ MLAs ഉണ്ട്, അതുമാതിരി SMLF ഉണ്ട്. പിന്നീട് വരുന്നത് ആർട്ടിൻ്റെ ഭാഗമാണ്, ആർട്ടും കൾച്ചറും വഴിയായിട്ട്. അപ്പം 2016 കൈരളി കലാനിലയം വീണ്ടും റീവാമ്പ് എടുത്തു. അന്ന് അതിൽ പ്രധാനമായിട്ട് രാജേഷ് ആയിരുന്നു അതിൻ്റെ പിന്നിൽ പ്രവർത്തിച്ചത്. പക്ഷേ ഗോപിനാഥ് പിള്ള സാറ് വളരെ കൃത്യമായിട്ട് മാർഗരേഖ തന്നിട്ടുണ്ട് എങ്ങനെ പോകണം. അപ്പോൾ അതിനനുസരിച്ചിട്ടാണ് നമ്മൾ ഇന്ന് പോയിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നത്. അതിനുശേഷം നമ്മൾ 16 ശേഷവും നാടകങ്ങൾ നല്ല രീതിയിൽ കൊണ്ടുപോയി, അതും വളരെ ഹൈ സ്റ്റാൻഡേർഡോടുകൂടിയാണ് അതിന് കൊണ്ടുപോയിരിക്കുന്നത്. പിന്നീട് വരുന്നത് കോവിഡാണ്. കോവിഡിൻ്റെ സമയം വന്നപ്പോൾ എല്ലാവർക്കും അറിയാം, എല്ലാം അസ്തമിച്ച പോലെയായിരുന്നു. പക്ഷേ ഞങ്ങൾ അപ്പോഴും വിട്ടില്ല. കോവിഡിൻ്റെ സമയം 3 ദിവസം തുടർച്ചയായിട്ട് നാടകം ചെയ്തു. ആ 3 ദിവസം തുടർച്ചയായിട്ട് നാടകം ചെയ്തത് ഇന്ന് നാടകം ഇന്നാണെങ്കിൽ ഇന്ന് രാവിലെയാണ് നമ്മൾക്ക് നാടകം കളിക്കാനുള്ള അവസരം തരുന്നത്, പെർമിഷൻ തരുന്നത് 1-ാം ദിവസം. അപ്പോൾ അന്നത്തെ ആ കോവിഡ് സിറ്റുവേഷൻ മോണിറ്റർ ചെയ്ത് 2-ാം ദിവസം പെർമിഷൻ 2-ാം ദിവസം രാവിലെ തന്നെ തരുന്നു. പക്ഷേ എന്തുകൊണ്ട് 3-ാം ദിവസം നാടകത്തിൻ്റെ പെർമിഷൻ ആ 2-ാം ദിവസം നമുക്ക് കിട്ടി. കാരണം നമ്മൾ ആ രീതിയിലായിരുന്നു ആ പ്രവർത്തനം മുന്നോട്ട് കൊണ്ടുപോയിക്കൊണ്ടിരുന്നത്. ഇന്ന് ഇപ്പം അടുത്ത്, അതായത് മാർച്ച് 17, 18, 19 തീയതികളിൽ ഒരു നാടകം സിംഗപ്പൂരിൽ അരങ്ങേറാൻ പോവുകയാണ്. അത് വളരെ വളരെ വ്യത്യസ്തമായ രീതിയിലാണ് ആ നാടകം വരാൻ പോകുന്നത്. ഫ്രഞ്ച്, ജർമ്മൻ, മലയാളികൾ ഇവരെല്ലാം ഉൾപ്പെട്ടുകൊണ്ടുള്ള ഒരു വളരെ അതിശക്തമായ ഒരു തീമായിട്ടാണ് ആ നാടകം മുന്നോട്ട് വരുന്നത്. അതിൻ്റെ പ്രധാന ഒരു അത്ഭുതം ഞാൻ പറയാം. സെക്കൻഡ് വേൾഡ് വാറിൽ ഫ്രഞ്ച് നാസി ക്യാമ്പിലും അതേമാതിരി ജയിലിലും അകപ്പെട്ട മയ്യഴി എന്ന് പറയും, ഇന്നത്തെ മാഹി എന്ന് പറയും. ആ മാഹിയിലുള്ള ഒരു മാധവൻ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞ ഒറിജിനൽ കഥാപാത്രമാണ്. അദ്ദേഹം അവിടെ ജയിലിൽ കിടന്ന് അതിനുശേഷം മരണപ്പെടുന്നതിന് മുന്നിലുള്ള അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ പൂർണ്ണമായിട്ടുള്ള കുറേ കാര്യങ്ങൾ അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ മനസ്സിൽ വരുന്നതാണ് നാടക രൂപത്തിൽ നിങ്ങളുടെ മുന്നിലേക്ക് വരാൻ പോകുന്നത്. അത് ഒരു വളരെ വളരെ ചാലഞ്ചിങ് ആയിട്ടുള്ളൊരു നാടകം കൂടിയാണ്. അപ്പോൾ അത് ഗുഡ്മാൻ ആർട്സ് സെൻറ്ററിൽ മാർച്ച് 17, 18, 19 തീയതി നിങ്ങളുടെ മുന്നിലേക്ക് വരും. എല്ലാവരും അന്ന് അവിടെ ഉണ്ടാകുമെന്ന് ഞാൻ പ്രതീക്ഷിക്കുന്നില്ല, എല്ലാവരും ഉണ്ടായിരിക്കണം. അതാണ് ഒരു വളരെ ചാലഞ്ചിങ് ആയിട്ടൊരു നാടകമാണ്. പിന്നെ ചേച്ചി എന്നെ കഴിഞ്ഞ മാസം വിളിച്ചു, ഗോപിനാഥ് പിള്ള സാറിൻ്റെ ബുക്ക് ലോഞ്ചുണ്ട്, വരണമെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു. ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞു വരാം. അപ്പം ചേച്ചി പറഞ്ഞില്ല, അല്പം എന്തെങ്കിലും സംസാരിക്കണം. ചേച്ചിയോട് ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞു, ചേച്ചി ബുക്ക് ഞാൻ വായിച്ചിട്ടില്ല, അതുകൊണ്ട് ബുക്കിനെ കുറിച്ചൊന്നും എനിക്ക് പറയാൻ പറ്റില്ല എന്ന്. പക്ഷേ തൊട്ടടുത്ത് 1-2 ദിവസം കൊണ്ട് തന്നെ ഞാൻ ആ ബുക്ക് സംഘടിപ്പിച്ചു. ബുക്ക് ഒന്ന് റിവ്യൂ ചെയ്തെങ്കിലും ഇന്ന് ഞാൻ അതിനെക്കുറിച്ച് സംസാരിക്കാൻ അർഹനല്ല. ആ ഒരു ഹൈ ലെവലിൽ പോയിരിക്കുന്ന ഒരു പുസ്തകമാണത്. അപ്പം എനിക്ക് ഒന്നൊരു സജഷൻ വെക്കാനുള്ളത്, ഗോപിനാഥ് പിള്ള സാറ് മലയാളി കമ്മ്യൂണിറ്റിയിൽ എന്തായിരുന്നു എന്നുള്ളത് അത് വളരെ കൃത്യമായിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു വർഷങ്ങളായിട്ട് അദ്ദേഹം ഇതിൽ പ്രവർത്തിക്കുക, അതിൻ്റേതായിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു മലയാളത്തിലുള്ള ഒരു പുസ്തകം. അദ്ദേഹം എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഓരോ സംഘടനകളുമായിട്ട് ഓരോരോ മറ്റ് ഹിന്ദു സമാജമായാലും ഏത് രീതിയിലായാലും അവർ എങ്ങനെയാണ് പ്രവർത്തിച്ചത്, അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ ആ സംഭാവന എന്താണ് ഇവിടുത്തെ മലയാളികൾക്ക് കൊടുത്തത്, മലയാളത്തിനും മലയാളിക്കും കൊടുത്തത് എന്താണ്, അത് എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നു ആരുടെയെങ്കിലും കയ്യിൽ നിന്ന് ആ പുസ്തക രൂപത്തിൽ തലയിൽ നിന്ന് പുസ്തക രൂപത്തിൽ വെളിയിൽ വരും എന്നുള്ളത് ആ രീതിയിൽ ഞാൻ ആഗ്രഹിക്കുന്നു. അതിനായുള്ളൊരു പ്രവർത്തനം മുന്നോട്ട് പോട്ടെ വിചാരിച്ച് തൽക്കാലം നിർത്തുന്നു. താങ്ക് യു വെരി മച്ച്.
What a wonderful suggestion. By the way, the translation of this book is already going on, and we hope to be able to release it. A certain speaker who is going to come may update us on that. All right. We have 4 more speakers, right? And a quick chit-chat if there is time. 4 more speakers. The first of whom is going to appear on the screen because he had to take off for job commitments, but upon persuasion, he decided to put a video up. So, can we have that video? This is Srikanth, who has the volume, please.
Good evening, Singapore. It is a matter of immense pleasure and great honor for me to participate at this event releasing Mr. Gopinath Pillai's book, More Than the Eye Can See. I would have loved to do this in person. As I am traveling, I had to do this video message, and my gratitude to the organizers for arranging to relay this message. I am not really qualified to say much about Mr. Pillai, as I had only brief interactions with him. But in spite of the brevity of those interactions, Mr. Pillai, you left a very profound and lasting impact on me with your wisdom and your kindness. Your book has been a captive read, demonstrating your unique ability to deliver truth in a plain and simple manner, especially when the situation is utterly confusing and directionless. Your book brings out many such instances, but please allow me to mention one of my personal experiences. In 2015, as SMA prepared to celebrate SG50, we drew up plans for a grand event spanning 10 days. Though we were excited by the scale and challenges of the event, as the organizing chairman, I was confused and paralyzed by one overwhelming concern. What if we ended up blowing away the entire bank balance of the Singapore Malayalee Association in this extravaganza? At that juncture, we met you to present our grand plan. You listened to us attentively and then started off expressing your support for our hard work. And you said, quote, "The scale of the event should fit the budget that you are very, very sure of raising," unquote. Your short and crisp remark made us go back to the drawing board and come up with a one-day event that turned out to be a huge success. Thank you, sir, for saving us on that day. Speaking the truth is a great virtue, but to do it with a fine balance of pragmatism and diplomacy is an art, which the book shows us how well you have perfected this art. I recollect on an event by the Malayalam Language Educational Society to promote Malayalam, how you implored the Malayali community to consider learning Chinese. As we read through your book, your experience of integrating with the non-Indian community in Singapore, your successful operations in India and Pakistan, we can better relate your advice to the community to pick up new languages. Only a natural diplomat with a fearless soul could have delivered that message on that stage. Your book reads like a Malayalam classic fiction, with a narrative like a novel by M.T. or Vaikom Muhammad Bashir. The innocence of childhood, pain and uncertainties of separation, interplay of tradition and modernity, search for new horizons at times of stability, finding love, struggles of keeping life moving forward, all sounds very familiar to those classics. But your life is no fiction, very real and inspiring. From your book, if there is one thing I have to point out as more than what eyes can see, is that my generation was fortunate to live in the post-war, post-Cold War era, with the last 30-40 years being a period of stability, cooperation and prosperity. You played a significant part in making this happen for our generation in Singapore. Thank you very much, Mr. Gopinath Pillai.
I forgot for a moment that there was part 2. Apologies. So the next speaker is someone who was inspired by the new energy behind publications in Singapore in Malayalam, and he started one in 2012 called Idaligal or Petals. May I invite Satyan, young man, to share his thoughts.
I think the generation is getting changed. മാന്യ സദസ്സിന് സാദര നമസ്കാരം. SMA സംഘടിപ്പിക്കുന്ന ഈ ഒരു കാര്യപരിപാടിയിൽ SMA-യുടെ ഒരു റെപ്രസെൻറ്റേറ്റീവ് എന്ന നിലയിൽ സഹകരിക്കാൻ മാത്രമായിരുന്നു ആദ്യം ഉദ്ദേശിച്ചിരുന്നത്. എന്നാൽ സത്യൻ സഹകരിച്ചാൽ മാത്രം പോരാ, സംസാരിക്കുക കൂടി വേണം, അതും മലയാളത്തിൽ തന്നെ വേണമെന്ന് സ്നേഹത്തോടെ സുനിച്ചേച്ചി പറഞ്ഞതിൻ്റെ അടിസ്ഥാനത്തിലാണ് ഞാനിപ്പോൾ നിങ്ങളുടെ മുന്നിൽ നിൽക്കുന്നത്. ശ്രീ ഗോപിനാഥ് സാർ കഴിഞ്ഞ ഒട്ടേറെ വർഷങ്ങളിലൂടെ സാമൂഹിക മുന്നേറ്റങ്ങൾക്ക് വേണ്ടി പ്രത്യേകിച്ച് സിംഗപ്പൂരിലെ മലയാളി സമൂഹത്തിൻ്റെ നന്മ ലക്ഷ്യം വെച്ചുകൊണ്ട് നടത്തിയ ഒട്ടേറെ പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങൾ, ആ പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങളെ ഞാൻ ഒറ്റ വാക്കിൽ യജ്ഞം എന്ന് വിളിച്ചോട്ടെ. യജ്ഞം എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ സമർപ്പണം എന്നാണെന്നാണ് ഞാൻ മനസ്സിലാക്കിയിട്ടുള്ളത്. എന്നാൽ അദ്ദേഹം സമൂഹത്തിന് വേണ്ടി നടത്തിയുള്ള ഒട്ടേറെ യജ്ഞങ്ങളിലൊന്നും തന്നെ പ്രത്യക്ഷമായോ പരോക്ഷമായോ ഞാൻ പങ്കാളിയായിട്ടില്ല. ശ്രീ ശങ്കരാചാര്യർ, സ്വാമി വിവേകാനന്ദൻ, ശ്രീനാരായണ ഗുരു, മഹാത്മാഗാന്ധിജി, APJ അബ്ദുൽ കലാം, ഇവരെല്ലാം സമൂഹത്തിൽ നിരന്തരം ഒട്ടേറെ സാമൂഹിക സേവനങ്ങൾ അനുഷ്ഠിച്ചവരാണ്. എന്നാൽ നമ്മൾ ആരും തന്നെ ആ സാമൂഹിക പ്രവർത്തനങ്ങളിൽ പങ്കാളികളായിരുന്നില്ല, അല്ലേ? പക്ഷേ അവർ സമൂഹത്തിന് വേണ്ടി തന്ന ആ മൂല്യങ്ങളെക്കുറിച്ച് സംസാരിക്കാൻ നമുക്ക് ഒരുപക്ഷെ സാധിച്ചേക്കാം. അത്തരമൊരു സാധ്യതയായി ഇതിനെയും കണ്ടാൽ മതി. ഏറെക്കുറെ വ്യക്തിപരമായിട്ടുള്ള 2 കാര്യങ്ങളിലാണ് ശ്രീ ഗോപിനാഥ് സാറുമായിട്ടുള്ള എൻ്റെ ഇടപെടലുകൾ ഞാൻ ഹൃദയത്തിൽ സൂക്ഷിക്കുന്നത്. പ്രവാസി പബ്ലിക്കേഷൻ പ്രസിദ്ധീകരിച്ച എൻ്റെ ഒരു മഴക്കാലത്തിലൂടെ എന്ന കുഞ്ഞു പുസ്തകം പ്രകാശനം ചെയ്തു തന്നത് ശ്രീ ഗോപിനാഥ് സാറായിരുന്നു 2013. അന്ന് ആ പുസ്തകത്തിൻ്റെ ആദ്യ കോപ്പി ഏറ്റുവാങ്ങിയത് ഡോക്ടർ VP സാറായിരുന്നു. സാറിന് ഓർമ്മയുണ്ടാവുമെന്ന് വിചാരിക്കുന്നു. മറ്റൊരു ഇടപെടലുകൾ എനിക്ക് അദ്ദേഹവുമായി ചെയ്യാൻ ഭാഗ്യം ലഭിച്ചത് അതിൻ്റെ തൊട്ടടുത്ത വർഷം 2014 സിംഗപ്പൂരിൽ നിന്നുള്ള ആദ്യത്തെ ഓൺലൈൻ മാഗസിൻ ഇതളുകളുടെ 2ാം വാർഷിക ആഘോഷങ്ങൾ വുഡ്ലാൻഡ്സ് കമ്മ്യൂണിറ്റി സെൻറ്ററിൽ വെച്ച് നടത്തിയപ്പോൾ അതിൻ്റെ അധ്യക്ഷ സ്ഥാനം വഹിക്കാൻ സമ്മതം നൽകിയത് ശ്രീ ഗോപിനാഥ് സാറായിരുന്നു. അധ്യക്ഷ സ്ഥാനത്തേക്ക് വരേണ്ടതായിരുന്നു. നിർഭാഗ്യവശാൽ അവസാന നിമിഷം ചില ശാരീരിക ബുദ്ധിമുട്ടുകൾ കാരണം അദ്ദേഹത്തിന് വാർഷിക ആഘോഷത്തിൽ പങ്കെടുക്കാൻ സാധിച്ചില്ല. പക്ഷേ അദ്ദേഹം എനിക്ക് ഒരു സന്ദേശം അയച്ചു തന്നിരുന്നു. ആ സന്ദേശത്തിൽ സിംഗപ്പൂരിലുള്ള മലയാളികളോട്, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ സിംഗപ്പൂരിലെ മലയാളികളെ ശ്രീ ഗോപിനാഥ് സാർ എത്രത്തോളം മനസ്സിലാക്കിയിട്ടുണ്ട്, എത്രത്തോളം സ്നേഹിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്, സിംഗപ്പൂർ മലയാളികളെ അദ്ദേഹം എത്ര കണ്ട് വിലമതിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്, ഒപ്പം സിംഗപ്പൂരിലെ വിവിധ കൂട്ടായ്മകളെ അദ്ദേഹം എത്രത്തോളം ചേർത്ത് നിർത്തിയിട്ടുണ്ട് എന്ന് പ്രതിഫലിക്കുന്ന വലിയൊരു സന്ദേശമായിരുന്നു അത് എന്ന് ഞാൻ ഈ അവസരത്തിൽ ഓർക്കുകയാണ്. അങ്ങനെ സമൂഹത്തിനു വേണ്ടി ഒട്ടേറെ നന്മകൾ ചെയ്ത, സേവനങ്ങൾ ചെയ്ത ഒരാൾ തൻ്റെ ജീവിത അനുഭവങ്ങൾ പുസ്തക രൂപത്തിലാക്കുമ്പോൾ തീർച്ചയായും ആ പുസ്തകം മറ്റ് പുസ്തകങ്ങളിൽ നിന്ന് വേറിട്ട് നിൽക്കും. തീർച്ച. മോർ ദാൻ ദി ഐ ക്യാൻ സീ. ഈ പുസ്തകം ഞാൻ വായിച്ചിട്ടില്ല. പക്ഷേ ഈ പുസ്തകത്തിൻ്റെ ശീർഷകത്തിൽ നിന്നു തന്നെ അതിൻ്റെ ഉൾക്കാമ്പിൻ്റെ ശക്തിയും ആഴവും നമുക്ക് മനസ്സിലാക്കാൻ സാധിക്കും. മോർ ദാൻ ദി ഐ ക്യാൻ സീ എന്ന് ഞാൻ വായിക്കുമ്പോൾ എനിക്ക് പെട്ടെന്ന് ഓർമ്മ വരുന്നത് കവി കടമ്മനിട്ടയുടെ ഒരു കവിതയാണ്, കോഴി എന്ന പേരിൽ. തള്ളക്കോഴി തൻ്റെ കോഴി കുഞ്ഞുങ്ങൾക്ക് ജീവിതത്തിൽ എന്തൊക്കെ ശ്രദ്ധിക്കണം, എന്തൊക്കെ ഭയക്കണം, എങ്ങനെ ജീവിക്കണം എന്ന് കോഴിക്കുഞ്ഞുങ്ങൾക്ക് പറഞ്ഞു കൊടുക്കുന്ന ഒരു കവിതയാണ്. വളരെ മനോഹരമായ ഒരു കവിതയാണത്. തീർച്ചയായും ഏതൊരമ്മയ്ക്കും അച്ഛനും തൻ്റെ മക്കൾക്ക് പറഞ്ഞു കൊടുക്കാൻ ഉതകുന്ന വലിയൊരു സന്ദേശം ആ കവിതയിലുണ്ട്. ആ കവിതയിലെ ഏതാനും വരികൾ ഇങ്ങനെയാണ്. കണ്ണു വേണമീരൂറമെപ്പോഴും, കണ്ണു വേണമീരൂറമെപ്പോഴും, കണ്ണു വേണം മുകളിലും താഴെയും, കണ്ണിലെപ്പോഴും കത്തിജ്വലിക്കുമ്പോൾ കണ്ണു വേണമണയാത്ത കണ്ണ്. കണ്ണിലെപ്പോഴും കത്തിജ്വലിക്കുന്ന ഉൾക്കണ്ണ് വേണം, അണയാത്തൊരു കണ്ണ് എന്ന് കവി ഇവിടെ ഉദ്ദേശിച്ചത് തീർച്ചയായും നമുക്ക് ഏവർക്കും വേണ്ട ഉൾക്കാഴ്ചയാണ്. ഇവിടെ മോർ ദാൻ ദി ഐ ക്യാൻ സീ എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ ശ്രീ ഗോപിനാഥ് സാർ അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ ജീവിത വീക്ഷണങ്ങളോടുള്ള, സാമൂഹിക ധർമ്മങ്ങളോടുള്ള, സേവനങ്ങളോടുള്ള അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ ഉൾക്കാഴ്ച തന്നെയല്ലേ? ഈ ഉൾക്കാഴ്ച നമ്മുടെ മുത്തശ്ശന്മാരും നമ്മളോട് എന്നും പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുള്ള കാര്യമാണ്. കണ്ണുണ്ടായാൽ പോരാ, കാണാൻ സാധിക്കണം. മോർ ദാൻ ദ ഐ ക്യാൻ സീ പറയുന്നതും ഒരുപക്ഷെ അത് തന്നെയായിരിക്കാം. മറ്റൊരു കാര്യം, ഇപ്പോൾ ഇവിടെ നിസ്വാർത്ഥ സേവനത്തിലൂടെയുള്ള അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ നിസ്വാർത്ഥ സേവനങ്ങളോടുള്ള ഉൾക്കാഴ്ച എന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ മറ്റൊരു കാര്യം ഞാൻ എൻ്റെ ശ്രദ്ധയിൽപ്പെട്ടത്, പ്രതിഫലേച്ഛ കൂടാതെ പ്രവർത്തിക്കുന്നവർക്ക് മാത്രമേ സേവന രംഗത്ത് ഇത്രയേറെ വർഷങ്ങൾ പിടിച്ചു നിൽക്കാൻ സാധിക്കുകയുള്ളൂ എന്ന് ഞാൻ വിശ്വസിക്കുന്നു. കർമ്മണ്യേവാധികാരസ്ഥേ മാ ഫലേഷു കഥാചന മാ കർമ്മഫല ഹേതുർഭൂർമാതേ സാംഗത്വ കർമ്മണി എന്ന് ഗീതാശാസ്ത്രം നമ്മെ പഠിപ്പിക്കുമ്പോഴും ഓർമ്മിപ്പിക്കുമ്പോഴും സ്വാഭാവികമായി നമുക്ക് ഒരു മനസ്സിലൊരു ചോദ്യം വരാം. ജീവിതകാലം മുഴുവൻ ഇങ്ങനെ സമൂഹത്തിന് വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് ഫലേച്ഛയൊന്നുമില്ലാതെ ജീവിക്കുന്നവർക്ക് സത്യത്തിൽ എന്താണ് അവർക്ക് നേടാൻ കഴിയുന്നത്? അതിന് സുപ്രീം ബുദ്ധൻ്റെ ധർമ്മപദത്തിൽ ഉത്തരം പറയുന്നുണ്ട്. ധർമ്മപദത്തിൽ ശ്രീ ബുദ്ധൻ പറയുന്നു, അങ്ങനെ ജീവിക്കുന്നവരാണ് ജീവിതത്തിൽ ശാശ്വതമായ ശാന്തിയും സമാധാനവും കൈവരിക്കുന്നത്. കാലം മുന്നോട്ട് പോകുമ്പോൾ നാളുകളിൽ തീർച്ചയായും സിംഗപ്പൂരിലെ മലയാളി സമൂഹത്തിന് മറ്റൊരു ഗോപിനാഥ് സാറിന് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ മറ്റൊരു കുമാരേട്ടനെ പോലെയുള്ള ആളുകളെ ആവശ്യമാണ്. പുതിയ തലമുറയിലുള്ള, വരും തലമുറയിലുള്ള സമൂഹത്തിന് വേണ്ടി നന്മ കാഴ്ചവെക്കാൻ സന്നദ്ധരായ യുവതി യുവാക്കൾക്ക് തീർച്ചയായും മോർ ദാൻ ദ ഐ ക്യാൻ സീ എന്ന ഈ പുസ്തകം ഒരു വഴികാട്ടിയും വഴിവിളക്കുമാകുമെന്ന് നമുക്ക് പ്രത്യാശിക്കാം. മോർ ദാൻ ദ ഐ ക്യാൻ സീ ലോകമെമ്പാടുമുള്ള ആളുകൾ വായിക്കപ്പെടട്ടെ, ഒരുപാട് ചർച്ചകൾ ചെയ്യപ്പെടട്ടെ, വരുന്ന തലമുറയ്ക്ക് വലിയൊരു മുതൽക്കൂട്ടാവട്ടെ എന്ന് ആശംസിക്കുന്നതോടൊപ്പം, ശരീരമാദ്യം ഗലുധർമ്മ സാധനം എന്നാണല്ലോ പറഞ്ഞിരിക്കുന്നത്. അതിനാൽ അതായത് ആരോഗ്യമുള്ള ശരീരമുണ്ടെങ്കിൽ മാത്രമാണ് സാമൂഹിക സേവനങ്ങൾ നമുക്ക് ചെയ്യാൻ സാധിക്കുള്ളൂ. ശരീരം സൂക്ഷിക്കേണ്ടതാണ് ആദ്യം വേണ്ടത്. ഇവിടെ ഒരുപാട് ജീവിത വീക്ഷണങ്ങളുള്ള, ഒരുപാട് ജീവിത അനുഭവ സമ്പത്തുള്ള, ഇപ്പോഴും പുതിയൊരു പ്രസ്ഥാനം സാമൂഹിക സേവനത്തിന് മുൻനിർത്തിക്കൊണ്ട് ഒരു പ്രസ്ഥാനം മുന്നോട്ട് വരികയാണെങ്കിൽ തീർച്ചയായും അതിനും ചുക്കാൻ പിടിക്കാൻ സന്നദ്ധനായ ശ്രീ ഗോപിനാഥ് സാറിൻ്റെ ആരോഗ്യത്തിന് വേണ്ടി പ്രാർത്ഥിക്കുക എന്നത് നമ്മൾ ഓരോരുത്തരുടെയും കടമയാവുന്നു. അത്തരത്തിലുള്ള ഒരു പ്രാർത്ഥനയോടെ നിർത്തുന്നു. നന്ദി, നമസ്കാരം.
Nandi Satyan, we have two more speakers. The next person suddenly plunged into the scene in Singapore Malayalee community work around 20 plus years ago. And since then, he has given his all whenever there is an event at the background. But I realized at an event some 7-8 years ago that there is a poet in this person as well. I asked him earlier whether he's going to recite a poetry. He said, not today. May we put our hands together to welcome Ullas.
നമസ്കാരം, വിശിഷ്ടാതിഥികളെ, സുഹൃത്തുക്കളെ. സാധാരണ എൻ്റെ സ്ഥാനം ചായയ്ക്കും നിങ്ങൾക്കിടയിലാണ്. ഇന്നൊരല്പം ഇമ്പ്രൂവ്മെൻ്റ് ഉണ്ട്, ഒരു സ്ഥാനം മുന്നിലാണ്. എൻ്റെ ഈ ചെറിയ പ്രസംഗം പുസ്തകത്തെ പറ്റിയല്ല, അദ്ദേഹത്തോട് നടത്തിയിരിക്കുന്ന ആശയവിനിമയങ്ങളുടെ അടിസ്ഥാനത്തിലാണ്. വെറും 3 കാര്യങ്ങളാണ് എനിക്ക് നിങ്ങളോട് പറയാനുള്ളത്. വളരെ എളുപ്പത്തിൽ തീർക്കാം. ഒന്നാമത്തേത്, ശ്രീ ഗോപിനാഥ് പിള്ള അദ്ദേഹം മലയാളികൾക്കായി ഇവിടെ ഒന്നും ചെയ്തിട്ടില്ല എന്ന് പറയാനാണ് ഞാൻ ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത്. ഒന്നുകൂടി മാറ്റി പറഞ്ഞാൽ, മലയാളികൾക്ക് മാത്രമായി അദ്ദേഹം ഇവിടെ ഒന്നും ചെയ്തിട്ടില്ല. അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ കീഴിലുള്ള എല്ലാ പദ്ധതികളും മലയാളി എന്ന സങ്കുചിത ചിന്തയ്ക്കപ്പുറം ഇന്ത്യൻ സമൂഹത്തെയും, അങ്ങനെ നോക്കിയാൽ സിംഗപ്പൂർ ജനതയും ഉദ്ദേശിച്ചുള്ളതാണ്. അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ കമ്പ്യൂട്ടർവൽക്കരണ പരിപാടിയാണെങ്കിലും നാഷണൽ യൂണിവേഴ്സിറ്റി മുഖാന്തരമുള്ള സ്കോളർഷിപ്പ് പരിപാടിയാണെങ്കിലും മലയാളികളാണ് അതിൽ മുൻകൈ എടുത്തിരിക്കുന്നത് എന്നത് ഒഴിച്ചു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ അതിലെ പ്രായോജകരും അതിലേക്ക് സംഭാവനകൾ നൽകിയിരിക്കുന്നവരും എന്നാൽ അതിൻ്റെ ഗുണഭോക്താക്കളായിരിക്കുന്നവരും മലയാളികളല്ല, അത് സിംഗപ്പൂർ സമൂഹം മൊത്തത്തിലാണ്. അങ്ങനെ പ്രബുദ്ധനും അഭിമാനിയുമായ ഒരു മലയാളി ആയിരിക്കെ തന്നെ ലോകമേ തറവാട് താൻ എന്ന രീതിയിൽ ദേശീയവും അതിനപ്പുറവുമുള്ള ഒരു മാനവികത ഉയർത്തിപ്പിടിക്കുന്നത് അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ ഒരു ബലഹീനതയാണ് എന്ന് നാം വിചാരിക്കുന്നു. രണ്ടാമത്, മലയാള ഭാഷയെപ്പറ്റി, മലയാള ഭാഷയോട് അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ സ്നേഹം എല്ലാവരും കുറച്ചു മുന്നേ പറഞ്ഞിരുന്നു. എന്നാലും അദ്ദേഹവുമായുള്ള ഇൻട്രാക്ഷനിൽ നമുക്ക് മനസ്സിലാക്കാൻ കഴിയുന്നത് മലയാളികളായ എല്ലാവരും മലയാളം പഠിച്ച് സർവജ്ഞപീഠം കയറണം എന്ന് അദ്ദേഹം ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നില്ല. നേരെ മറിച്ച് മലയാളികൾ എല്ലാവരും തന്നെ ചൈനീസ്, മലയ് മുതലായ ഭാഷകൾ പഠിച്ച് സിംഗപ്പൂരിനോട് ഇണചേരുകയും താതാത്മ്യം പ്രാപിക്കുകയും ചെയ്യണം എന്ന് ആഗ്രഹിച്ചു. മലയാളി അസോസിയേഷൻ വളരെ ശക്തമായ രീതിയിൽ ചൈനീസ് ക്ലാസുകൾ നടത്തണമെന്ന് എപ്പോഴും അദ്ദേഹം പറയാറുണ്ട്. സിംഗപ്പൂരിന്റെ വിദൂര ഭാവിക്ക് വെല്ലുവിളിയായി അദ്ദേഹം കാണുന്നത് വംശീയമായ വേർപാൽ മുന്നോട്ട് പോകുന്ന ഒരു രാജ്യത്തെയാണ്. അത്തരത്തിലുള്ള വെല്ലുവിളികൾ ഒഴിവാക്കാനായി ന്യൂനപക്ഷ സമുദായങ്ങളെല്ലാം ഭൂരിപക്ഷ വംശങ്ങളോട് ചേർന്ന് പ്രവർത്തിക്കണം എന്നാണ് അദ്ദേഹത്തിന് നമുക്ക് മനസ്സിലാക്കാൻ കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ടുള്ളത്. നമ്മുടെ വേരുകൾ ഉറപ്പിച്ചു നിൽക്കാൻ ശ്രമിക്കുന്നതോടൊപ്പം തന്നെ തണ്ടിനെയും ഇലകളെയും സംരക്ഷിക്കേണ്ടതിൻ്റെ ആവശ്യകതയും ഭാവിയിൽ ഉണ്ടാകുന്ന പൂവിനെയും കായ്കളെയും പരിരക്ഷിക്കേണ്ടതിൻ്റെ ആവശ്യകതയും അദ്ദേഹം നമുക്ക് പറഞ്ഞു തരുന്നു. മലയാളി എന്തായാലും ചൈനീസ് പഠിച്ചിരിക്കണം എന്നത് വളരെ വിരോധാഭാസമായി തോന്നാമെങ്കിലും എത്രയും ലളിതമായ ഒരു ആശ്രയമാണ്, ഒരു പ്രായോഗിക ആശയമാണ് അദ്ദേഹം മുന്നോട്ട് വച്ചിരിക്കുന്നത്. മൂന്നാമത്തേത് വളരെ സിമ്പിളായിട്ടുള്ള കാര്യമാണ്. പൊതുവെ ഒരു നല്ല മലയാളിക്ക് വേണ്ട യാതൊരു ഗുണങ്ങളും ഇല്ലാത്ത ആളാണ് ശ്രീ ഗോപിനാഥ് പിള്ളായി എന്ന് കൂടി എനിക്ക് പറയേണ്ടി വരും. ഉദാഹരണമായി, ഇപ്പം നമ്മൾ ഇന്ന് 2:30 മീറ്റിംഗ് വെച്ചു. ഒരു 2:45 3 മണിക്കോ ഈ മീറ്റിംഗ് തുടങ്ങുക എന്നുള്ളത് നമ്മുടെ ഒരു ജന്മാവകാശമാണ്. ഗോപിനാഥ് പിള്ള അദ്ദേഹം ഒരു 2:25 തന്നെ ഇവിടെ തയ്യാറായി വരും. അദ്ദേഹം വീട്ടിലാണെങ്കിൽ 2:25 തന്നെ ഗേറ്റിൽ വന്ന് നിന്ന് എത്തിയിട്ടുണ്ടോ എന്ന് നോക്കും. അത്തരത്തിലുള്ള സമയനിഷ്ഠ കാണിക്കുന്നത് തികച്ചും അപലപനീയമാണ് എന്നാണ് എൻ്റെ അഭിപ്രായം. അതിനിവിടെ തന്നെ പറയേണ്ട മറ്റൊരു കാര്യം ഒത്തൊരുമയാണ്. ഏകദേശം ഒരു 25,000 ആൾക്കാരെ ഉള്ളൂ എങ്കിലും 25-30 ശാഖകളായി പിരിഞ്ഞു നിൽക്കുന്ന പടർന്നു നിൽക്കുന്ന ഒരു വലിയ മരമാണ് സിംഗപ്പൂരിലെ മലയാള മരം. ഇതിലെ ഏത് ശാഖയുടെയും അമരത്ത് അദ്ദേഹത്തിന് വളരെ അനായാസം എത്ര കാലം വേണമെങ്കിലും ഇരിക്കാമായിരുന്നു. എന്നാൽ ഈ മലയാളി മരത്തിന് കരുത്തേകുന്ന ഒരു സൂര്യനായോ ഒരു മഴയായോ ഒരു കാറ്റായോ മാത്രമാണ് അദ്ദേഹം ശ്രമിച്ചത്. ജന്മനായുള്ള കസേരയോടുള്ള അഭിനിവേശം ഇല്ലായ്മ അദ്ദേഹം വെളിപ്പെടുത്തിക്കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുന്നു. കസേരകൾ അദ്ദേഹത്തെ തേടിയെത്തിക്കൊണ്ടേയിരിക്കും. ഇരിക്കാൻ സമയമില്ലാത്ത കസേരകൾ. ഒരു ഇരിക്കത്തന്നെ ആത്മാർത്ഥതയും വൈകാരികതയും സത്യസന്ധതയും നിലനിർത്തുക എന്നത് വലിയൊരു കാര്യമാണ്. ശ്രീ ഗോപിനാഥ് പിള്ള മനോഹരമായി തന്നെ നിലനിർത്തുന്നു. ഞാനും അദ്ദേഹത്തോട് ചോദിക്കുന്നത് എങ്ങനെയാണ് ഇത്രയും പ്രമുഖമായ കാര്യങ്ങൾ ഒരുമിച്ച് ചെയ്യാൻ കഴിയുക? അദ്ദേഹവും അത് പറയുകയുണ്ടായി. അദ്ദേഹം നൽകിയ ഉത്തരം, ലീഡേഴ്സ് ഷുഡ് നോട്ട് ഗെറ്റ് ദംസെൽസ് entangled in the details. Fill yourselves with people capable more than you are and trust them. എന്നാണ് അദ്ദേഹം നൽകിയ ഒരു മറുപടി. എന്തൊരു ഒരു പ്രത്യേകതയുള്ള ഉത്തരമാണ് എന്ന് നമുക്ക് ആലോചിക്കാം. പുസ്തകത്തിലുടനീളം നിറഞ്ഞു നിൽക്കുന്ന ശ്രീമതി ശ്യാമളയുടെ സാന്നിധ്യം നമ്മൾ ശരിക്കും ശ്രദ്ധിക്കണം. വീട്ടിലെത്തുമ്പോൾ ഒരു ആതിഥേയയുടെ വേഷം അണിയുമെങ്കിലും പ്രസക്തമായ സംഭാഷണങ്ങളിലൊക്കെയും വളരെ വ്യക്തവും ശക്തവും ക്ലിപ്തവുമായ അഭിപ്രായങ്ങൾക്കുടമയാണ് ശ്രീ ശ്യാമള എന്ന് നമുക്ക് മനസ്സിലാക്കാം, ശ്രീമതി ശ്യാമള എന്ന് നമുക്ക് മനസ്സിലാക്കാം. അതുകൊണ്ട് തന്നെ അങ്കിളിന്റെ ഷാർപ്നെസ്സിലും ക്ലാരിറ്റിയിലും has some source of background we can see. Now we know he has to practice with someone, and if Serena Williams daily practices with Venus, nobody can beat her, right? സംതിങ് ലൈക്ക് ദാറ്റ്. അദ്ദേഹത്തോട് ആശയവിനിമയം നടത്തിയ എല്ലാവരും അദ്ദേഹത്തിൻ്റെ എളിമയും ലാളിത്യവും വാത്സല്യവും മലയാള ഭാഷാ വൈദഗ്ധ്യവും വാക്ചാരുതയും എന്നെന്നും മനസ്സിൽ കാത്തു സൂക്ഷിക്കും എന്നതിൽ സംശയമില്ല. അദ്ദേഹത്തിന് ദീർഘായുസ്സും ആരോഗ്യവും നേരുകയാണ്. And special thanks to John for bringing this special gift from Mr. Gopinath to us. It's wonderfully written with a great flow. It is very easy to read and with very intricate details. I shall finish with a quote from this book, which probably shows his diminishing faith in astrology. Astrology has been referred many times in this book. Quote, "The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars." ബ്രൂട്ടസേ വിധിയിലല്ല കാര്യം എന്ന് ഞാൻ മലയാളത്തിൽ തർജ്ജമ ചെയ്യുന്നു. അത് പറഞ്ഞപ്പോഴാണ് ഒരു കാര്യം മറന്നു. നമ്മുടെ SMLF ഈ പുസ്തകം മലയാള തർജ്ജിമ ഏറ്റെടുത്തിരിക്കുകയാണ്. ശ്രീമതി ശ്യാമളയ്ക്ക് കേൾക്കാൻ താല്പര്യമുള്ള ഒരു വിഷയമായിരിക്കും. ഞങ്ങൾ അങ്ങനെ ഇത് ഏറ്റെടുത്തിരിക്കുന്നു. ഈ വർഷം എപ്പോഴെങ്കിലും ഇത് തീർക്കണമെന്നാണ് ഞങ്ങളുടെ ആഗ്രഹം. അതിനടുത്തേക്ക് എത്തുമ്പോൾ അതിൻ്റെ ഒരു പുരോഗതി അറിയിച്ചുകൊണ്ടിരിക്കാം. Going back, ബ്രൂട്ടസേ വിധിയിലല്ല കാര്യം, and that shows the determination to take fate in one's own hands. And Mr. Gopinath Pillai is the best example in front of us. Majula Singapura, Jai Hind.
Thank you, Ullas. I will just change the mic, if it is the mic which is the problem. We have just one more person. Ullas mentioned him, the author behind the book. He has traveled with Mr. Pillai in this journey in writing the book, and he's got many insights, not about the facts alone, but the feelings he had at those certain points. My pleasure now to invite John Water, and I've checked the pronunciation, John Water.
It was very nice of him to ask for the pronunciation of my last name, and actually that has happened a couple times since coming here today. Normally people mispronounce it, so thank you all very much. So I would like to begin first by thanking all the speakers for reading the book so attentively and affectionately, and for the manner of insights which they have shared through their personal friendships and professional partnerships with Mr. Pillai on his life and various specific episodes pertaining to the Malayalee community, which they have brightly touched upon from his collection of memoirs. So as was mentioned, I'm the co-author of the book, and at the two other events which were organized around More Than the Eye Can See by the Institute of South Asian Studies, I had the privilege of delivering the introduction and speaking on the arc of Mr. Pillai's life, as well as how it intersected with a broader national story of Singapore. But I must say that it is a pleasure to anchor the discussion this time around, not because of wanting to shirk from the responsibility of framing a productive conversation, but because of the pleasure that I've taken listening to others' memories of Mr. Pillai, from which I have learned a great deal. I am grateful to the Singapore Malayalee Association, or SMA, for organizing this discussion and for the opportunity to talk on the book through the lens of Mr. Pillai's relationship with and belonging to the Malayalee community. I'm also a translator from Hindi, and in preparing my notes on this theme, one word which kept coming to mind when framing my thinking on Mr. Pillai's relationship with the community is the word apnapa. So I came across this word one day, roughly 4 years ago, when translating a short story for a magazine. And I imagine many in the audience know some Hindi in addition to Malayali, so they might know the meaning of this word already. When I had entered it into the online Shabdakosh dictionary, I got words like affinity, self-respect, oneness, intimacy, and kinship. When I did it in the old-fashioned way of thumbing through the Oxford Hindi to English dictionary, apnapa will redirect you to apnapan, from which you get the same definitions that I had previously described. But for once, I thought Google Translate did a better job in its slightly clunky, literalistic translation of apnapa, one's own, which I felt got closer to the special resonance which the word had intimated to me. the sense of something, a place, or a person being one's own. I like the word because it suggests a constitutive element. If something is said to be one's own, you can also say that it is a part of you, that it belongs to you. An individual can have a feeling of apnapa, or close intimacy, for a community, and a community likewise can have a feeling of apnapa when one of its members does good and goes on to achieve significant things. The Malayalee community, I would imagine, must be rightfully proud of Mr. Pillai's achievements, much in the same way that he would speak with a sense of personal pride about the significant initiatives of the Malayalee community, which they had undertaken, especially in terms of the magnitude of the support for the underprivileged that it has been able to provide relative to its size. And I remember now some lines from the keynote address, which is that credibility and being relevant where it matters are very important. So if I spoke Malayali, I might have chosen different words, but I suppose an equivalent readily at hand would be the title of the Malayalam newspaper started by Mr. Pillai's father, K.S. Pillai, Kerala Bandhu. In the book, Mr. Pillai translates this as relative of Kerala. Another word in the general vicinity of Bandhu in the dictionary includes bandan, the idea of being tied to or bound to something. As the stories of the speakers thus far have made clear, Mr. Pillai, throughout his life, had a special bond to Kerala and the Malayali community, and cultural ties to a family whose culture and place of origin informed his attitude towards the world. Mr. Pillai held leadership positions in many Indian and South Asian diaspora-related organizations. Along with the Hindu Advisory Board and the Indian Heritage Center, he also prominently lists being a senior advisor to the Singapore Malayali Association. The latter part of the book, chapters 22, 23, and 24 in particular, in those sections, he focuses his attention on the good work that the various South Asia-related organizations were accomplishing. Together with the significant contributions of these organizations, we structure the latter portion of the book to explore how Mr. Pillai relates himself to his cultural heritage more broadly. He candidly told me that he did not see his Singaporean and Malayali identities as being mutually exclusive. So I may, at this juncture, go one step further in the context of the discussion today to conjecture that not only did he view them as not being mutually exclusive, but they were perhaps actually mutually constitutive of one another. In the same way that being Malayali is part of Mr. Pillai's identity, the Malayalis, through their active involvement in social work in the SMA and other organizations, have constituted important threads of the social warp and weft of Singapore. Mr. Pillai recounts a specific episode in chapter 22, in which the Indian communities collectively honored Mr. Lee Kuan Yew in 1992 and paid tribute to his legacy of multiracialism and meritocracy. The book that was gifted to him on this occasion comprised articles composed in multiple Indian languages. The book was titled A Place in the Sun. This poetically evocative title spotlighted the ideals which Mr. Lee Kuan Yew had established in Singapore and which Mr. Pillai also deeply respected. That everyone should have their seat at the table and that all communities, if they were prepared to lift up their sleeves and do the hard work, would find their place in the sun. Mr. Pillai states at the beginning of his section, Social Work with the Community in chapter 23, a section that he had already had in mind to write about for when we first started planning the book involving the Malayali community, that he had always approached the Indian community from these twin perspectives, saying that both he and the community had directly benefited from them. More than the eye can see is Mr. Pillai's personal story, but it could also be called a Malayali story, as it also traces the history of his extended family, as well as his nuclear family in Singapore. There is much, I think, in this book that will be of historic interest to the Malayali readership, as Mr. Pillai was such a stalwart of the community and leader. He documents in his first chapter how Malayalis have been coming to Singapore since the 20th century on the lookout for jobs, and he cites research from Ona Paharam, a publication of the Singapore Malayali Association, so as to detail the professional capacities in which they initially arrived: teachers, plantation workers, and clerks at the British naval base in Seletar. later in the book when he looks back at that early wave of Indian immigrants to Singapore. A quality that seems to have stuck out in his mind regarding his parents' generation, which he remarks upon, was their desire to embark on better lives through hard work, and their willingness to do that hard work. This opened a path for them to thrive, and many hold prominent positions in Singapore today. He highlights in the Pollock quote to the first chapter the sense of home away from home which the Malayalis established in Singapore through the sense of cultural community which they created, where the elder generation spoke in Malayalam, which comforted them and which they were also able to pass on to the next generation. From what I understand, the first avatar of the SMA, the Kerala Mahajana Sangham, was also founded at the turn of the century in 1917, only several years before Mr. Pillai's father arrived to Singapore in the mid-1920s. And if I recall correctly from some of my reading and research, the SMA, or the early version of it, also assisted with that early process of acculturation for new immigrants. From his family memories, Mr. Pillai describes how the community had helped one another to find jobs and even start new families, whereby Malayali men went back to India to marry and return with fresh brides. It was in a similar fashion that Mr. M.R. Menon, the principal of the commercial school of YMCA on Stamford Road, arranged a good match for Mr. Pillai's father with Malati Pillai. Mr. Pillai's descriptions of the Malayali diaspora, however, serve as more than just a historic backdrop. One could say that customs of the community propelled the plot of the book and the trajectory of Mr. Pillai's life significantly when, a year before World War II, his parents had decided that it was time for Mr. Pillai and his sister to visit his mother's parents in Kerala. Mr. Pillai shared with me how Malayalis have a matriarchal society and how customarily Malayali Hindu women return to the parents' home to give birth. The family trip with his mother to her ancestral house, when Mr. Pillai had grown sufficiently old enough to travel at 3 years, was the catalyst, inadvertently, which led to his mother and sister's separation for nearly 7 years from his father and 2 uncles during the Japanese occupation. From the ages of 3 to 10, Mr. Pillai spent his boyhood years in the paddy fields of his grandfather's estate in Kerala, who was a local landowner at that time. These early years in Kerala had a formative influence. Despite the war unfolding abroad, he reported that being in nature, surrounded by animals, felt indulgent like a holiday, and separately related to me how thrilled he was with the tutor situation, who would come to the house to teach, rather than him having to go to formal school, as in other contexts he might normally have done. He would jest this was one of the perks of growing up in India. Before the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, I understand that Mr. Pillai would often go back to his family's home, state of Kerala, to visit with family and relatives. He describes them later in chapter 4 as being considerably impressed with his Malayalam, which he had made personal efforts to master, given his father's philosophy towards language, that one should know one's mother tongue. One other line that I had excavated from my notebooks and old files, which he had shared with me offhandedly, was, "There is nothing like going back to your roots." Elsewhere in the book, he also speaks to the special way he has of relating to his roots and ancestral tradition. This is most often seen through anecdotal stories that he shares on lessons which he learned from his mother and father. In the writing of the book, I could tell his childhood experiences in Kerala continued to fascinate him. Though he only alluded to certain cultural items in passing when he had initially outlined his time in Kerala to me, I often prodded him to say more. Maybe because I am an outsider to the community, he was, out of consideration and politeness to me, a bit diffident at first about going into too much detail. But one of the benefits of having a co-author is being able to have someone else help to hone in on those aspects that are interesting. And I enjoyed watching him perk up with delight when I asked him to speak more on, for instance, Pambum Kav, the snake sanctuaries, or the role of snake worship in Hinduism. Other items of cultural specificity might include a description of the Padipura, or gatehouse, through which the paddy field stretched as far as his young and keen eyes could see. And finally, there was a story he was fond of telling about the ritual called Mashi, part of the practice of Mantravadam, which he compared to black magic in rural Kerala, whereby, through the help of 2 mediums, he and his family were able to ascertain the well-being of his father and 2 uncles in Singapore. In his free time, I think that Mr. Pillai also just naturally enjoyed researching cultural practices of Kerala like these. And it is perhaps therefore fitting that many years after his exposure as a boy to some of Kerala's customs, he would be nominated to be the chairman of the Content and Concept Committee at the Indian Heritage Center, where his interests in culture also had room to expand and encompass other parts of India. Where belonging, apnapa, is tied to a place, it is also tied to a language of the language of one's community and family relationships. The book went through multiple rounds of revision, in which Mr. Pillai and I reviewed rough drafts of the text together. The family was also very closely involved in the editing process and offered many invaluable suggestions. From my background as a translator, I found many of the changes we made intriguing. In the episode with the mediums, for instance, when Mr. Pillai's sister had reported that she could see an image of her father appear from the ink on her hand, he had originally told me that she had exclaimed, "Papa is here, Papa is here." But as we went over the text, Mr. Pillai wanted me to change the word to achan. Similarly later, we described the mediums wearing veshti rather than just sarongs. And as we worked with the family in the final editing stages, we decided to change the way his two uncles are referred to in the text, from simply Uncle Uni, Uncle Rameshan, to Uni Mama or Ramesha Mama. There are other instances where Mr. Pillai spoke of the Malayalee community more directly. I believe that anecdote has been shared of the Onam celebration dinner in which Deputy Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong was invited as the chief guest. And in pondering with the community over what could be done to honor his attendance, he states that he felt that as Keralites had a keen interest in education, we should also do something in modern education and training. And this subsequently led to the initiative to set up the IT Services Cooperative to put computers in the homes of the lower income group in Singapore Indian community. The value which the Malayalee community places on education appears in various contexts in the book. And in our conversations together, Mr. Pillai had remarked on how the Keralites spent a lot of time making sure that their children were better educated than they were. The theme of quality education amongst the Malayalis, for example, appears when he had first entered into St. Andrews, and the Australian principal at that time, on looking at his report card, had made a remark to the effect that he had noticed that children from Kerala were very good at their studies. It also appears in Malati Pillai's encouragement of him to continue on with his university education and higher studies, and possibly in his own consideration about doing a PhD before his life took a different turn. More compelling to me still were the different ways in which he thought about the different roles of education. This could be a separate presentation in and of itself, and I'd like to end soon so we can talk amongst ourselves. But one line which always stood out to me, inspired in part by his youngest uncle, was that a degree is not as important as an education, which he defines as learning that which would be of value to others. At that time, he had a sense of moral obligation to those who were struggling. Education, in that context, was seen as a practical way of extending support. And from what I understand from my readings about SMA and the types of initiatives it has been involved in, such as raising $500,000 in bursary for needy students through NUS, this value of education, not only in its intrinsic worth in terms of art and culture, but rather in terms of leveling the playing field, is also shared amongst the Malayali community as well. Various Onam celebration dinners were mentioned in the book, and of Onam itself, Mr. Pillai explained to me that it is the most important festival amongst Malayalis and tells a little bit about them, and that they emphasize on non-religious aspects. This explanation maybe also reflected Mr. Pillai's rationalistic secular values and prioritization of openness and inclusivity. In the book, he states, "Traditionally, all communities are welcome to participate. Although it is a Hindu festival, the Muslims, Syrian Christians, and Roman Catholics often attend. We have sought to bring a similar spirit to Singapore by inviting our Chinese and Malay friends." And I'm happy to say that I witnessed this spirit firsthand when I was invited to celebrate my first Onam with Mr. Pillai's family. And it was also the first time that I had heard the word achan, achan, and as various people were being summoned to the dinner table. So it's with a spirit of gratitude and a nod towards this spirit of inclusivity that I would like to thank you all for inviting me as a friend to speak today on the book and on Mr. Pillai's life. And I greatly look forward to your questions during the Q&A. Thank you.
To him at that stage. So I invite now Sunu, Vice President of Singapore Malayalee Association, and John back on stage. With all your warmth and hands coming together, we would like to present a token of appreciation to Mr. Wong. So just so that you know that we were not, that I didn't wink you, that was set up already behind to have that Q&A session, but we will just skip it. Sunu is standing there to say that it is real. Okay, so with your warm round of applause, thank you, John. It was really a beautiful book, well written, simple to understand, but loads of anecdotes and real feelings. We also now invite Prakash Pillai on stage. We would like to thank Dr. Pillai, all of us here from the various organizations, for the contributions that he has made as an advisor. I also invite now all the presidents or representatives of the various Malayalee organizations, the keynote speaker, Mr. Vishwa, and the other speakers on stage to take a group photograph. Let's first present this token of appreciation to Prakash Pillai with your round of applause. Now with all of them there, can I invite Vishwa, Chandra, and the other speakers as well, and the representatives from the other organization on stage for a group photograph. Thank you. Suresh, if you can make your way up. Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Mr. Dola, please come join us. Come. Can I have Sudhir from your this side and you to come and join us? If I missed out any of the other organizations, if you are here as representatives, please come. A big group. But you know, this photograph is very special because it captures all of us as Malayalis thanking Mr. Pillai for his contributions. Okay, so, you know, I always say this. We wanted Uncle Basi to come up, but, you know, it was requested that he can't come up. Okay, now, when we have a big group, there's only one way to get everybody to coordinate the smile, and that is really literally in your hands. So if you give us a big round of applause, then I think we will be able to get the smile up. And that was a sample of the applause. So now, after the cameraman has given the cue, you have to give us a louder round of applause. So on stage, are we ready? Right? Okay. Now on cue, your applause, please. Thank you so much. Now, as everyone makes their way down, I'll hand the mic over to Prakash to say a few words on behalf of the family.
Thank you, Bill. Just a quick vote of thanks from the family to all of you. Thank you so much for spending your afternoon, here to listen to various speakers about my father's book. I'd very much like to thank the speakers as well. I thought they, all did a very, very good job. Everything from the heart. Some of the speeches were quite erudite. One speaker, his Malayalam, I couldn't understand very much because it was very, very high standard, one could see. It was really very heartwarming to see so many people, all this outpouring of positive sentiment and goodwill towards my father. My father is not in good health, so he couldn't be here, but I think he'd be very, very happy to hear the sort of level of support that he's getting from the community. Particularly the organizers as well. I'd like to thank the Singapore Malayalee Association, done a fantastic job. It's a very nice premises and a very, very good occasion. And sort of promote his book this way was very, very kind of you. This would mean a lot to my father. He was, very much a Malayalee. And this is without exaggeration. This is something that was very, very important to him. If you read his book, you'll see all the various things that were important to him. I think the book communicates very effectively his life, what his priorities were, and so on. But more than the eye could see, I think, was his identity as a Malayali. I think that was at the core of everything. I think John described it very well. It informed, everything he did. It was the prism through which he saw his life. And that could be traced back, if you read his book, it could be traced back to his time in Kerala, the 7 years he spent there. The way he describes it's almost like a fairy tale. It's not a real place, this Kerala. It's some imaginary, wonderful utopia, where he grew up in, full of love, good cheer, and it's something that meant a lot to him. And he brought that back to Singapore, and I think Singapore, the Malayali community, has that experience to thank for the sort of the energy that he poured into the Malayali cause in Singapore. This was something that was deeply important to him. He put all his energy into it. There were two things in particular that he was very keen on. One was to present a united front among Malayali organizations to Singapore. That was very important to him. And all the charm and so on that was been described by the speakers was used to bring people together, to present that united front of a united but diverse culture. And I think that was conveyed very, very effectively through his actions. And the second thing that he wanted for the Malayali community was standing within Singapore. We are not, our language is not one of the 4 national languages. We are a minority within a minority in many ways. It's very easy to forget about us. It's very easy to sort of relegate us to a sort of second division sort of culture. But he wanted the Malayali culture community to stand alongside everybody else, to be regarded as important in Singapore. And he pushed that cause relentlessly. So Mr. Jayakumar was talking about the temple. I think he'd be very, very happy to hear about that because that's something that was very dear to him. I went with him many years ago to Shabrimala, and the sort of passion in which he pursued that, this sort of development would be very, very important to him. And that sort of thing also had an impact on the family. He ensured that we grew up as sort of with a Malayali sort of identity, very importantly with a Malayali sensibility. Our customs within the family, our family culture, our food. We have family names. I'm Apu. When I was young, everyone used to just call me that, and Prakash was something that came much later. It was that sort of fostered a Malayali sensibility, an identity, which he entrenched. And one of the speakers spoke about his advice about Chinese and so on. He was very keen to balance that with the multicultural environment that we live in. The recognition of the fact that there is a majority culture. We are also an English-speaking country. It was important for us to carry ourselves that way, English-speaking. My second language at school was Chinese, Mandarin Chinese. And that was because of my father and my mother, who sort of pushed it, made me do that. But at the same time, ensured that I retained a Malayali sort of sensibility. And, and just looking at him by example, my father, the way he was able to balance these multiple identities is something that I was seeking to emulate, because no matter in life, no matter which way the ball spins, you play your shots in your own cultural style. And the power and effectiveness in which he was able to do that was a shining example for me, and I'm sure for many others as well. So that was my father, and that's why an event like this, I think, would be supremely important to him. This is something that he would hold very dear. So I'll end where I started, which is to thank everyone, for this wonderful occasion, and enjoy the reception to follow. And please ask John a lot of questions because he's very well informed about, what my father was up to all these years. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Prakash. So with that, we have come to sort of the end of this part of the event, and as Prakash had mentioned, there's a reception outside, and we hope that there will be a lot more sharing and questioning. Now, I just want to touch on 2 points before we end the session. Prakash just spoke about it, some of the speakers spoke about it. Mr. Pillai was a very, very proud Malayali. Many in the Tamil community do not know that I'm a Malayali, so they share quite vividly their thoughts. One very senior community leader was speaking about Mr. Pillai, and he came out to say, Mr. Pillai is such an inspiration, he does so many things. But one thing, every chance he gets, he will speak about the Malayali community. That was him. He was very spirited, and not only that, whether it's an organization like some of them have shared, whether it's an individual, as long as you step up to do something for the community, small or big doesn't matter, and he knows about it, he will appear and he will bless and he will inspire. That has happened many, many times. I've had the benefit of working with many of the Malayali organizations, and he makes it a point, as long as he's in Singapore, he will come on time, as someone had mentioned, and make sure that he will come and tap on your shoulders, and that's very well organized, and he will whisper a couple of things maybe you can improve on. So he was really a very fatherly figure to the entire Malayali community. Thank you, Mrs. Pillai and family, for sharing Uncle with us, because it really made a difference, a big, big difference. So thank you so much. And on that note, I'd like to invite all of you to the reception outside. Please stay, please mingle, please ask John all the questions that you want, because he's hungry to share. Unfortunately, we could not have that session because of time. So thank you, Nandi, Namaskaram.